Chapter 536, Light of swords shot from Yan Jiu's eyes, which were painful to anyone witnessing it. He was the heir to the Sword Saint Villa, and his ancestor had been the legendary Sword Saint. Yet now, there was someone threatening him to hand things over, whether he liked it or not. Light of swords shot from Yan Jiu's eyes, which were painful to anyone witnessing it. He was the heir to the Sword Saint Villa, and his ancestor had been the legendary Sword Saint. Yet now, there was someone threatening him to hand things over, whether he liked it or not. Voom, voom. Sword will burst forth and 9 sword-like beams manifested behind Yan Jiu like 9 swords being unsheathed. All 9 swords also bore different wills in them, as if vastly different powers resided within all 9 swords. 9 beams of light shot upwards behind Yan Jiu, and 9 gleaming silhouettes of a sword appeared high in the air. Yi Futian lifted his head and was able to sense the power within his opponent's swords. All top-notch figures possessed extraordinary talents and abilities. Yan Jiu was an heir to the Sword Saint Villa and his ancestor had been a Sword Saint as well. It was simply a given that he was no weakling himself. Everyone around stared at the scene flabbergasted. The famed 9 swords of the Celestials, incredibly powerful techniques which were rumored to be Yan Jiu's namesake. It was as if the Sword Saint Villa had hoped Yan Jiu would be able to master the 9 swords of the Celestials' techniques, and usher yet another glorious era of the Sword Saint. Gather round, Yan Jiu uttered coldly. The vast number of mighty ones around him struggled in their minds. Should I fight, or should I leave? Anyone who stays and fight, I will take it as a move against me. You are all to show them no mercy, Yi Futian added coldly. Indeed. Hundreds of mighty ones behind him drew their swords as soon as he was done talking. Sword wills seemed to have encased the entire area in an instant, truly a powerful scene like no other. The movements of everyone on Yi Futian's side showed unparalleled unity, and it also showed that Yi Futian had been far more charismatic with his followers than Yan Jiu had been with his. Yan Jiu's expressions were razor-sharp and his sword aura gleamed. One of the beams of swords boomed in brilliance, and the sword took flight menacingly. A terrifying sword will seem to flow between heaven and earth into that very sword. A fearsome cyclone conjured by the sword whipped up. A golden giant sword was seen in the air. Its patterns gleamed brilliantly as if to overpower the space which it occupied. Kill him. Yan Jiu pointed at Yi Futian, and it seemed that thousands of sword wills flowed within an instant, gushing at Yi Futian. Everyone present was able to feel the crazed torrent of sword aura conjured, and the brilliantly gleaming golden giant sword came to bear. The heavens howled in metallic noises as if signifying the sword that was to kill everything in its path. Boom! The earth shook violently as Yuan Zhan leaped into the air. Its golden body shone just as brilliantly as the crazed sword. He threw out his hand and conjured giant golden palm before him in an instant. Terrifying light flowed around the palm like it would suppress everything in its path. All apes learned the 81 strikes of heaven traversing staff techniques, but that was not to say that the apes knew nothing else but said staff techniques. The great golden apes were known for their magnificent offensive and defensive capacities too. However, when the giant golden sword lashed out, it tore the giant palm right in the middle, which caused it to crumble bit by bit. But then again, the giant sword seemed to have lost its powers right after. It was quickly shattered as Yuan Zhan slapped it with his own hand. Stainless. Overwhelming sword aura whipped past in the air. Yan Jiu did not show any intention of backing down by the attack met. Yet another sword shot out from the 9. Shadows of swords seemed to have zipped through the air like bolts of lightning and went for Yi Futian and everyone else instead of just Yuan Zhan alone. The sword was called stainless, meaning that it moved so fast that it left no stain of any kind behind. There were many who were shaken to their core below. Yan Jiu was a descendant of the Sword Saint. Every sword within his 9 swords of the Celestials seemed to be infused with notably different will and powers, yet all were just as fearsome. Yuan Zhan's massive body shook and a layer of golden sheen burst forth to cover his body. Stainless stabbed right into the layer, yet was unable to penetrate its defenses. Yi Futian stood far away with the polearm of divine destruction in his hand. His body was soon covered with fearsome starry brilliance, turning into an immortal celestial body himself, and let himself be assailed by the sword aura. Boom! Yuan Zhan took a step forward, shattering all the sword aura around him. His huge body seemed to have turned into a streak of golden lightning, making its way to Yan Zhou maniacally. Yi Futian shrugged his shoulders at the scene. With Yuan Zhan's help in the battle, the outcome was obvious. Yi Shaoshi had also become a top-class combatant by now, and it went without saying that Yi Futian, who now possessed the polearm of divine destruction, was such a being as well. Vroom, vroom. Several beams of light shot past and Yi Futian sensed one congealed sword aura to another zipped in the air. It seemed that the other mighty ones from the Sword Saint Villa had come for his head. The Sword Saint Villa revered Yan Zhou. However, other than Yan Zhou himself, all the others were uncommon breeds of fighters themselves possessing extraordinary talents. The sword attacks crossed with each other, forming countless X-shaped attacks cutting through the air as if they were a net made of blades. It seemed as if no matter where Yi Futian went, he was destined to be torn apart by the net of swords. Yi Futian extended his hand and meteors materialized before him, blocking the flashes of the swords coming for him. The celestial rocks were shattered, and the gleaming, crossing sword auras kept in their immense speed as they came for Yi Futian. A sword matrix then. Yi Futian took a step forward and lifted his polearm of divine destruction. A terrifying aura congealed around him, making the heavens and the earth howl. The polearm took the form of a 100-meter-long staff and was brought down hard at his front. The net of swords split down the middle in an instant. They gathered their sword aura again and whooshes from the swords were heard when they saw the extremely long staff swept at them in an overpowering manner as if it was out to block out the sky. They retreated quickly intending to evade, yet felt tremendous pressures weighed down on them, making it almost impossible to move, and it felt like they were soon to be crushed. Boom, boom, boom. Every figure that stood in the way of the giant staff was swept away violently, spewing blood as the hits landed. The others on the other side looked troubled as they swung their swords about. However, what followed were slithering sounds instead. Imperial vines blocked out the sky as they slithered to entangle the would-be assailants' bodies. They attempted to escape, yet the leaves of the vines quickly extended to seal the entire space they were in, before entangling them tight. The assailants activated immensely sharp sword wills, yet none of the vines were able to be cut. Just stay put already, Yi Shaoshi said lazily. The vines were thrown below shortly after. One silhouette after another dropped hard on the floor, and blood was seen soon enough. The battle had only gone on for a short time, yet many swordsmen from the Sword Saint Villa had already been removed from the game. The followers of Yan Zhou below dared not try anything funny anymore. With Yuan Zhan being more than enough to take on Yan Zhou, Yi Futian and Yi Shaoshi reigned supreme as they stood in the air. Anyone who dared tried anything was seen to be like someone having a death wish instead. Furthermore, all of the hundreds of swordsmen behind Yi Futian all drew their swords. As long as they moved, those hundreds would have moved as well. It would be the end of them as soon as they did so. Yan Zhou, who was tangling with Yuan Zhan, saw that the fight was not in his favor, and wanted to leave riding on his sword. However, Yuan Zhan would not have let him off easily. One strike with the staff had the air before it trembled, and Yan Zhou had no choice but to turn around and resist the attack. All 9 swords were launched, and the shadow of the staff was shattered. At the same time, Yi Futian's lightning steps completely blocked off Yan Zhou's escape as well, and Yi Shaoshi had also jumped to stand guard in another corner. The 3 mighty ones blocked Yan Zhou's way in the air off completely. Zoom! Yan Zhou took for higher altitudes at breakneck speeds, which was an apparent sign that he refused to be caged. Yuan Zhan roared and took a step forward. His golden staff whipped in the air. The shadows conjured blocked the sky, as well as Yan Zhou's way high above. A streak of curved trajectory was seen by Yan Zhou's body, which surprisingly went for Yi Futian. The sword flash was apparently the real deal, and what happened earlier was simply a feint. It was a setup. Yan Zhou's life spirit shone brilliantly, combining with the 9 swords, taking the form of 9 different sword wills that were dazzling to behold. The attack went straight for Yi Futian, and countless currents of sword aura in the air, as 9 different wills of the sword, flew at Yi Futian as well. The combined attack seemed to one determined to make its own path, killing anyone who dared stand in its way. Yi Futian's expressions became a severe one. All 9 swords were divine weapons and they emanated stunning lights as they came for him. The heir of the sword Saint Villa had truly been enraged. Starry storms whipped around Yi Futian as he told hold of the polearm of divine destruction. His body danced about like flowing auroras, and one strike with the staff was lashed out in the air. The strike, which shook the air before it, however, was not meant to attack anything, it was charging up instead. Yi Futian's movements were fast, yet they looked slow, emanating a unique rhythm. The ones around him were only about to see that he danced about while delivering a flurry of strikes with the staff. The resulting air of ferocity piled, yet the attack had yet to be seen. Boom! Yi Futian struck with 4 strikes with the staff in a very short span of time. A terrifying force gathered and the 5th strike was seen lashing out aggressively like a true dragon howling and everything shook in response. The light of the 9 swords arrived at the same time, conjuring proud flashes that aimed to kill everything, and clashed hard with the fearsome waves conjured by the polearm of divine destruction. That clash effectively conjured 2 harrowing currents. Yanzhou's 9 swords of the celestials burst with remarkable power. However, the attack was blocked by the strike with the staff. Attacks from Yuanzhan and Yi Shaoshi reached their intended target at the same time. Yanzhou shouted in anger and all 9 swords returned behind his back and then went for higher altitudes. His ice-cold eyes glared at Yi Futian, which congealed into terrifying will of the sword, cold to the point of freezing. A gust of crazed turbulence burst forth. Yanzhou's rushed attacks were incapable of resisting attacks from both Yuanzhan and Yi Shaoshi. He was stunned so badly that he ended up throwing up blood. Yi Shaoshi's golden vines whipped him about like long whips, sending him flying. Yi Futian took a step forward, looking at Yanzhou, who was being swiped in his direction, with cold eyes. He lashed out with his staff without mercy. Boom! A loud boom followed, as the strike immediately broke the bones on Yanzhou's body, and the poor man continued to throw up blood. His body remained levitated as his body, which was supported by sword aura, did not fall. His eyes remained sharp like a sword's despite seeing Yi Futian coming to him. Is it anger or humiliation you are feeling? Yi Futian spared a glance at Yanzhou without any hint of sympathy. The top-notch forces had not been kind to Yi Futian, they looked down on him from above, seeing him as nothing but prey. At that moment, however, he became the hunter, while Yanzhou, the prey. The holy badges, Yi Futian said coldly. Yanzhou held out his storage ring and threw it at Yi Futian. Yi Futian intruded the ring with his spiritual energy and saw more than 10,000 holy badges lying within. He turned to look at Yanzhou, who simply eyed him coldly without saying anything. He knew what was going on inside Yanzhou's head. It was only natural for him to feel dissatisfied and frustrated. It was as Yi Futian had put it earlier, you will hand it over whether you like it or not. There was no other choice, and Yanzhou knew what kind of predicament he was in at the moment. Nobody below was able to say anything. Yanzhou's holy badges had been taken. Let's go, Yi Futian said and ignored Yanzhou. He did not bear Yanzhou much of a grudge, and naturally saw no reason to kill him. If he had killed Yanzhou, the sword Saint Villa would have put him on their hit list. However, if Yi Futian had simply taken away the holy badges, it would have been only something between him and Yanzhou, and the sword Saint Villa would not possibly interfere with the affairs of the younger generation. The others turned and left. Many in the Flying Sword City were stunned as their eyes were locked at the silhouettes that went far away. They took a look at Yanzhou and saw those injured from Sword Saint Villa gathered around him, and they all looked very dejected. They had probably never suffered humiliation to such an extent in their entire lives. We will have our revenge when we got out of the holy road. Yanzhou turned around and left riding his sword. The holy road was not the main point of the trip. When the mighty ones from all 9 holy roads gathered before the holy Ji Palace when they got out of the holy road, He would have Yi Futian paid the most severe price for what he had been put through. An hour later, countless sword wills flowed crazily somewhere else from the flying sword city, gathering in one direction. An immensely huge sword silhouette was seen there. The silhouette was a transparent one, an illusionary figure made out of swords. Countless streams of sword aura flowed about the illusionary silhouette, bringing about a fearsome will. A single-arm figure stood quietly in the middle of the illusionary figure, and the countless sword wills flowed in his direction. The figure was none other than Yi Wuchen. All the other swordsmen who followed Yi Futian were able to sense the flow of sword will within the ruins, and they were envious of Yi Wuchen. They were able to tell that it was the purest of swordsmanship lineages and an utmost treasure to any who trained with the sword. It was only a matter of time that Yi Wuchen metamorphosed into something else. Yi Futian went taking the ruins from Yanzhou, an heir of the sword Saint Villa, just for him. That alone spoke volume of their friendship. Yi Futian stood before the ruins and he did not go up to feel it all. He was not a swordsman, and so he simply stood to see the ones who do there. He hoped that Wuchen would have been able to make a breakthrough, and it seemed that the day where the Holy Road was to be opened was closed. Chapter 537, News of Yi Futian snatching the holy badge of Yanzhou from Sword Saint Villa naturally caused some commotion. Yuan Zhan of the Golden Great Ape clan had actually partnered with Yi Futian. This made the other top forces feel danger and start discussing temporary alliances. If Yi Futian and Yuan Zhan dared to invade them together, they would unite and fight back. News of Yi Futian snatching the holy badge of Yanzhou from Sword Saint Villa naturally caused some commotion. Yuan Zhan of the Golden Great Ape clan had actually partnered with Yi Futian. This made the other top forces feel danger and start discussing temporary alliances. If Yi Futian and Yuan Zhan dared to invade them together, they would unite and fight back. Yanzhou had also gone there to get a share. Flying Sword City was taken now, so he could only put his hopes on the other cities. However, the relic in Flying Sword City was the only swordsman relic on the Holy Road. He was furious at this. However, Yi Futian didn't continue stealing. Yuan Zhan, Yi Shaoshi, and the others needed to cultivate. Yuan Zhan was a golden great ape, so he naturally had gold elemental power. Yi Shaoshi was the same. They'd both returned to the relic in Jinshao City to cultivate. Yi Futian prepared to cultivate quietly before opening the Holy Road. He hoped to make improvements in cultivation quickly. Days passed. In the blink of an eye, they'd been on the Holy Road for 3 months. That day, Yi Wuchen was inside a relic in the Flying Sword City. Thousands upon thousands of swords spun around him. Endless sword will whistled. Yi Wuchen's eyes were shut tightly as domineering power emanated from him. Crackle, crackle. Even more terrifying sword will flowed over, wrapping around Yi Wuchen and gathering before him. His entire body was silvery white like a sword. He transformed into a true sword body. At this moment, sword light flashed above him. Thousands of sword will buried into him, turning his body into a sword. He bore horrible power right now. He trembled. The sword chi around him transformed into a frightening storm that swept towards him crazily. Countless eyes in the relic turned towards Yi Wuchen. Hearts trembling violently, they wondered what he was doing. He's entering the next level, someone said. Thousands of sword will entered him and his body turned translucent like a sword. He was using the relic's sword will to smelt his body into a sword and break into the next plane. Doing this was dangerous because the sword will here was so frightening. Not only did he have to comprehend it, he also had to swallow the sword will. This was crazy. He could die from the sword will's backlash. He'll break into the next plane sooner or later. Why do this? Someone lamented. Some people were truly crazy for cultivation. Yi Wuchen was evidently one of those people. Sword chi completely submerged Yi Wuchen, almost tearing him to pieces. Cracks appeared in the sword body that he hadn't completely formed yet. He could break apart at any time and turn to dust. Right now, Yi Wuchen was completely concentrated. His mind was clear and he allowed the sword will to enter him without moving. Finally, terrifying sword light burst from him. All sword will fell silent in an instant. Then they started flowing orderly. Yi Wuqian opened his eyes. The sword will entered his body and gradually dissipated. However, his entire temperament seemed to change. He was like a sword standing there. Noble. Everyone's eyes flashed. Yi Wuqian had entered the noble plane. Yi Wuqian had been in the 9th tier of the Arcana plane. After being bathed with the relic's purest sword will, he naturally improved greatly. He wasn't like Yi Futian either. He only cultivated swordsmanship, so he fit the relic perfectly. This suited him better than the relics that Yi Futian and Yuxing found. Thus, he broke through the boundary of plane and entered the noble plane. Is everyone done cultivating? Yi Wuqian asked. The holy road will open soon. Let's stop here. Shall we regroup with Master Yi in Jinshao City? Someone asked. Okay. Yi Wuqian nodded. He stepped forward and the light on him dimmed gradually. The relic's light darkened as well before finally disappearing. Let's go, Yi Wuqian said. The group flashed and headed towards Jinshao City. The journey down the holy road had ended. Many of them had entered the next level. Even those who didn't had comprehended a lot and were close to the next level. Adding the sage will to this, they'd all received a lot. They also had holy badges and could go visit the Holy Ji Palace. Even if they couldn't join it, it was still a rare chance. In the Jinshao city's relic, Yi Futian, Yu Sheng and the others had stopped cultivating too. Seeing Yi Wuqian return, Yi Futian smiled. Wuqian, you broke into the next plane? He asked. He noticed that Yi Wuqian's temperament was different. Yes. Yi Wuqian nodded. Not bad. Little Eagle has entered the noble plane too. 7th senior brother is now a grade 7 noble, Zhiqiu is grade 8, and Yu Sheng and I are at the pinnacle of the Arcana plane. I think that I can become a noble at any time, Yi Futian said, smiling. This journey was quite satisfying. Everyone had great achievements. Not only was he close to entering the noble plane, he'd also comprehended many types of noble will. Once he became a noble, he would be much stronger than the regular nobles. Master Yi, thank you for your care on the holy road. Many people thanked Yi Futian. He didn't know who they were, but some of them had followed him from the start. No one had known how powerful Yi Futian was at that time. They only knew that he was a relic killer. Later, he began to make a name for himself on the holy road. He'd even stolen from Yanzhou. Ning Huang had died in his and Yu Sheng's hands too. Yi Futian was undeniably the most brilliant man on the Dawn Road. Of course, Xiao Junyi was also a frightening figure. However, he was too cold-blooded and killed everyone. Naturally, he wasn't popular. We helped each other. I didn't take care of anyone, Yi Futian said, chuckling. The holy road will be opened soon. I hope everyone will have good luck. Yes. We'll reach the Holy Ji Palace soon. I'm a bit excited. I wonder what this holy land will be like, someone mumbled. It's rumored that the Holy Ji Palace is a palace in the sky. It's grand and majestic, with many floating islands around it. It's the most miraculous place in the barren state. I heard that before too. Now, I can finally see it with my own eyes. Cultivators from all over were excited to see the cultivation paradise of the barren state. If they could become a disciple and cultivate in the Holy Ji Palace, then. They'd heard that the Holy Ji Palace's disciples were mostly in the Sage Plane. However, they didn't accept many disciples. Many people completed the 9 holy roads, but only 1 in 1,000 were picked to cultivate in the Holy Ji Palace. Yi Futian listened to their murmurs while thinking about something else. He was curious about the Holy Ji Palace, but he didn't care that much. He cared more that he could see Jieyu and second senior sister soon after exiting the Holy Road. It had only been around 2 years, but it felt like a century. Right then, everyone felt the ground shake. Then a sound rolled over. Take your holy badge to the end of the Holy Road. The Holy Road is open. Everyone's hearts trembled. Yi Futian looked in the distance and said, "Everyone, let's go. Let's go." Many people were excited. They flew in the air, going down the dawn road. Stepping out of the city and passing by the wilderness, they discovered that there was fighting everywhere. It was very bloody. Yi Futian glanced down. Beside him, Mu Jiqiu said, "Once the holy road is open, only those with holy badges can walk to the other end. If not, you can only backtrack." Thus, the fighting now is always the bloodiest. Yi Futian understood. It was not only the wilderness. Fights erupted everywhere on the dawn road. Only his vast group was peaceful. It was the first time something like this happened on the holy road. Before, there'd never been someone like Yi Futian who would open relics with a group. Even after opening the relics, Yi Futian's group could still snatch their holy badges. If he wanted to enter the Holy Ji Palace, the holy badges were his capital. Before, Ning Huang had just wanted to get as many holy badges as possible. Walking forward, the group finally arrived at the end of the dawn road. There was a curtain of light. A group of strong cultivators guarded there. Seeing Yi Futian's group, they were all shocked. How could there be so many people? This was a rare sight. Many people from the other top forces were there too. On their air warship, Bing Yi and Chu Shang stared deeply at Yi Futian and Yu Sheng. Yu Sheng had left a deep impression on them outside Jinqiao City. He was hard to forget. Nan Hao, Nan Feng and the others of the Nantian house looked at Yi Futian with strange expressions. Yan Jiu's eyes were the coldest. He'd received the least on the holy road. Though he'd stolen many more holy badges, he had no luck with the relics. The most infuriating thing was that he'd been robbed just as he'd collected 10,000 holy badges and was about to open the relic. At that time, a solemn and handsome figure walked over, attracting many eyes. Xiao Junyi was here. He stood quietly to the side. He looked harmless. It was hard to imagine how he truly was. Other than these top figures, many prides from the Dawn Road also gathered over. Of course, Yi Futian's group was the largest. The others couldn't rival them even when together. After all, the 3 months had been survival of the fittest. The weaker ones were eliminated in rounds. Only Yi Futian's group was the most harmonious. "Where's Ning Huang?" "I didn't see him," an elder from the Holy Ji Palace asked. The Holy Road was closed with no authority. Even those in the Holy Ji Palace didn't know what happened inside. Ning Huang was the descendant of Elder Ning. He thought highly of Ning Huang. They'd met before and knew Ning Huang was talented. Thus, he asked. To them, Ning Huang should be the most brilliant of all on the Dawn Road. As soon as he spoke, everyone's eyes turned strange. Many subconsciously looked to Yi Futian and Yu Sheng. This confused the strong cultivator of the Holy Ji Palace. Had something happened to Ning Huang? He knew his talent. This shouldn't happen on the Dawn Road. "Senior, Ning Huang was killed," someone said. The expression of the strong cultivator hardened. He was even more confused. Ning Huang was killed on the Dawn Road? Who? He asked. Instantly, countless eyes focused in one direction. Me. Me. Two voices rang out at once, Yi Futian and Yu Sheng. Yi Futian glanced at Yu Sheng. Yu Sheng had dealt the fatal blow, but Yi Futian had been the one battling Ning Huang earlier. He knew that Yu Sheng wanted to take responsibility for this outside Jinqiao City. "Many people saw that I killed him," Yu Sheng said indifferently. The strong cultivators of the Holy Ji Palace were shocked. The Holy Road had a high death rate. This was their rule too. Once in the Holy Road, anything could happen. It was the same for Ning Huang. Naturally, they couldn't blame someone just because Ning Huang had died. This would make the Holy Ji Palace seem unfair. However, it would be hard to tell Elder Ning that Ning Huang was killed. They knew that Elder Ning thought highly of Ning Huang and wanted him to take his place. It was unimagined how he'd react to this news. "Everyone's here. Let's go." The man looked away without saying anything. Chapter 538. The Holy Road's exit was similar to the connection between the ancient barren world and the eastern barren territory. When Yi Futian walked out of the Dawn Road, they were on a mountain. Many people looked over. They seemed to know that they were coming and waited there. They seemed to be filled with curiosity. The Holy Road's exit was similar to the connection between the ancient barren world and the eastern barren territory. When Yi Futian walked out of the Dawn Road, they were on a mountain. Many people looked over. They seemed to know that they were coming and waited there. They seemed to be filled with curiosity. These people all had different cultivations. A group of strong cultivators guarded on the side and said, "The Holy Road will be open for 3 days. During these 3 days, you cannot leave this island city. Remember, no fighting is allowed. If you have disagreements, find the island leader to resolve it. Those who break the rules will be killed. 3 days later, you will know what to do." Yes. Everyone nodded. These 3 days were probably for buffering. If those on the Holy Road had a chance to get a holy badge, they would come out in 3 days. However, Yi Futian guessed that 3 days weren't needed. If one couldn't get the holy badge on the first day, they probably would never get it. Those that got it would come straight out. Furthermore, this seemed to be an island city. Fighting wasn't allowed and those who broke the rules would be killed. The rules were extremely strict. Now, they were in the world of the Holy Ji Palace. Naturally, they had to follow the Holy Ji Palace's rules. "You can go now," the strong cultivator said. Yi Futian turned towards the mass walking behind him. He put his hands together. "We are now in the Holy Ji Palace's world and it's safe. We should bid farewell now. Master Yi, take care." Many people bowed to Yi Futian gratefully. They were safe now. Fighting wasn't allowed in the island city. Yes. Yi Futian nodded and then his body flickered away. People were watching from afar, but they didn't know the people walking out. The people of the island city were subsidiaries of the Holy Ji Palace. They were under the Holy Ji Palace's authority. "Mu Jiqiu, where are we?" Yi Futian's body shone. He discovered this was a true city. There were restaurants and inns. It was flourishing. Other than Mu Jiqiu's group, there were also people from the Starry School and Mount Jiuxian beside him. "Don't you know about the 1,000 Holy Islands?" Beside him, an air warship appeared. Bing Yi, Chu Shang and those from the mortal world were on the airship. The speaker was Bing Yi. Her beautiful features had a cold aura. She gazed at Yi Futian with curiosity in her pretty eyes. She really wanted to know how Ning Huang had died. Had Yuxing really killed him in his demonic state? And why did Yuan Zhan join them? Yuan Zhan was still there in Yi Futian's group. They seemed to be traveling together. He wouldn't do this if it was just simple cooperation on the Dawn Road, right? "I'm ignorant. How can I be compared to the goddess of the mortal world?" Yi Futian smiled faintly at Bing Yi. Bing Yi furrowed her brows. Yi Futian seemed not to take her seriously. His eyes wandered across her body as if judging her. This gaze made her upset. It was practically blasphemy. The top figures of the barren state wouldn't have such impolite gazes and regular people wouldn't even dare to look at her. Yi Futian was an anomaly. Bing Yi huffed coldly. She looked away and her clothing fluttered. "If you don't know, then you can look in the sky," she said coolly. "You'll see what kind of place it is." With that, the air warship moved past them, hurrying high into the sky. Yi Futian glanced at Mu Jiqiu and Yuan Zhan. They nodded. "It's my first time here too," Yuan Zhan said. "Let's take a look." "Okay," Yi Futian answered. The group roared upward, getting higher and higher. On the Dawn Road, it was rumored that Xiao Junyi's the inheritor of the Dark Saint. He's a horribly frightening existence and may be the strongest of the Dawn Road. What about Yan Jiu from the Sword Saint Villa? Yan Jiu was hurt by Yi Futian and Yuan Zhan working together. Even his holy badges were stolen. He probably will never forget this humiliation. Who are Yi Futian, Yu Sheng, and his group? They came out of nowhere and are so powerful. The enrollment will be very interesting this time. The Dawn Road alone has so many talents. Indeed. This is only the Dawn Road. The strongest 3 holy roads of the 9 are usually the Barren Road in the center, the Nether Road of the north, and the Heaven Road of the west. I'm sure shocking figures have appeared from these roads too. The Barren Road gathers the prides from the central region. It's always the holy road with the most monstrously talented figures. Their average skill level is the highest too. There's nothing more to be said, someone said, chuckling. 8 of the holy roads cross through the Zhongzhou City region to the central region. The 9th road was right inside Zhongzhou City. It was where the strong cultivators in Zhongzhou City gathered. Zhongzhou City was the biggest main city of Barren State. One could imagine how bustling it was. The Zhuge family wasn't within Zhongzhou City. Instead, they were outside in what was called the Zhongzhou lands. The Mortal World, Nantian House, Sword Saint Villa, and many other forces were in this area. Going east, it was the eastern region of the Barren State where the Zhaixing House and Divine Sky City were. I heard that a young lord came from White Cloud City. He's extremely talented and young. He's only around 20 years old, but he's already in the noble plane and has frightening combat ability. He's comparable to how the young city lord of White Cloud City had been. Didn't someone crazy from the Zhuge family come too? If you add that woman, then there are 2, but the woman's plane is slightly lower. Some people came from the Demon God clan too. Tomorrow, we'll be able to see all the monsters of the 9 holy roads. Just wait and see. Everyone discussed animatedly. At that time, someone stood up and left the restaurant. Many people followed him. Yi Futian arrived at the edge of the island city. There was an abyss before him. He gazed at the city in the distance. He wondered which island Jieyu was in. They would meet tomorrow. At that time, Hua Jieyu was cultivating in an inn on another island. Footsteps sounded. Hua Jieyu opened her pretty eyes. She was too beautiful to be from this world. Senior sister. Hua Jieyu smiled. Cultivating again? Zhuge Mingyue grinned. This island was part of the Holy Ji Palace and outsiders shouldn't be able to step foot inside. Zhuge Mingyu wasn't really an outsider though. Her father and brother had all cultivated here before, so she was an exception. Yes. Hua Jieyu nodded. Senior sister, will he come? Who knows? Zhuge Mingyue smiled. Oh, that annoying guy brought a handsome youth here. Apparently, he's some powerful figure from White Cloud City here for a visit. Would you like to see him? Hua Jieyu naturally knew that the annoying guy was the young city lord of White Cloud City. Senior sister, you know me. Hua Jieyu smiled gently. Yes, so I rejected him for you. Zhuge Mingyue chuckled at Hua Jieyu. Don't know where that kid got his luck so that you only think about him. Jieyu, what's so good about him? Him. Hua Jieyu thought of that bad boy and smiled brilliantly. Nothing's good. But you still like him? Zhuge Mingyue giggled. I just do. Hua Jieyu's smile was very bright. Looking at that beautiful girl, Zhuge Mingyue shook her head. This girl was in too deep. There was no hope for her. Chapter 539, The 3 days ended in the blink of an eye. The 3 days ended in the blink of an eye. The floating mountain range in the center of the 1,000 Holy Islands was the most majestic. It towered over the sea and rose up into the sky. Pavilions and towers were everywhere outside the mountain. It was like an otherworldly palace or a whole city. There were countless relics and cultivation paradises. This was the Holy Ji Palace, passed down the ages. It was a true holy land. The Holy River had thousands of mountains. These all belonged to the Holy Ji Palace. However, people usually called this one mountain by the Holy Ji Palace because only the core disciples could cultivate on that island. Regular disciples couldn't enter without permission. They could only cultivate with an elder on one of the other islands. Other than that, they would occasionally have the chance to listen to a palace elder's lectures on the Holy Island or cultivate in a relic. Thus, those who could cultivate on the Holy Island were all monstrously talented. They were all the best of the barren state. In the east of this majestic heavenly palace of the Holy Ji Palace, there was a shorter island neighboring it. There was a vast empty space on the borders. At the foot of the Holy Ji Palace, one could see stairs when raising one's head. The stairs led up to the Holy Ji Palace like the steps to heaven. This was truly at the foot of the Holy Ji Palace. At the moment, there was a mass of people gathered here, stretching as far as one could see. They were the disciples cultivating on the 1,000 holy islands and their family. Other than that, many important figures from the barren state had come too from the various top forces. They knew this was the end of the Holy Road. Those who'd exited the 9 holy roads had gathered here. Today was the day. Many elders who had high hopes for their juniors were here to watch. Of course, there were also some top forces who were close to the Holy Ji Palace and had come to give gifts. This vibrant scene happened once every 3 years. All talents of the barren state were gathered here. To the younger generation of the barren state, this was true magnificence. To the important figures, some of these juniors may become significant in the future or even enter the barren sky ranking. At the moment, someone was playing the guqin beautifully. It was mesmerizing. Even many important figures were affected by the artistic conception in the song. They looked over to one place. They saw a youth in a purple-blue robe sitting quietly on a smooth stone on the steps leading to the Holy Ji Palace. He plucked at the strings and created heavenly music. From serenity to a powerful melody, it seemed to depict an epic poem. This youth was untainted and had defined features. He was as handsome as a god. He didn't seem to be from the mortal world. Countless people from the vast space below the Holy Ji Palace looked up at the youth. Many of the younger generation were filled with respect and worship, even if they were prides too. They wished to become someone like him in the future. Many beautiful girls had expressions of admiration too. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the youth on the mountain was the most beloved man of the girls of the barren state. Even the strong cultivators from the Holy Ji Palace sitting beside the mountain path looked appreciatively at the youth. The people of the barren state were clear that this youth would be one of the most brilliant figures in the future. In fact, he already was. In the distance, strong cultivators from the other island cities arrived. People instantly looked up at them. They were the ones from the 9 holy roads who'd gathered here now. The people below looked at the incoming strong cultivators with anticipation. Were they finally here? Look there. The prides from the arid road are here. Everyone looked over and saw people walking over. One of them was a very young and handsome youth. His eyes were like lightning, shining like stars. That would be Bai Zhe. Many eyes fell on this youth. Bai Zhe was an extreme talent from the White Cloud City. He joined the Holy Road after entering the Noble Plain. Apparently, he'd opened countless relics on the arid road. No one could stop him. Now, his cultivation had reached the pinnacle of Grade 8 Noble Plain. He was probably one of the strongest this time. The Nether Road is here too. Someone looked in another direction and saw figures appearing gradually. Look there. Someone pointed in a direction. A group was walking over. Everyone was attractive, especially 2 of them. Zhuge Xing, Hua Jieyu, many people murmured. They recognized these 2. Zhuge Xing was the pride of the Zhuge family's younger generation. Hua Jieyu was Zhuge Mingyue's sister. As beautiful as the rumors say. Many more gazes fell upon Hua Jieyu. Her appearance seemed to add color to this vast space. She was so beautiful to look at. Seeing her was an enjoyment. We're here, Zhuge Mingyue said, smiling as she appeared beside Hua Jieyu. There was another innocent beauty beside them. Apparently, she was Beitang Xing'e, Zhuge Mingyue's junior sister. She was always beside Zhuge Mingyue. Yes. Hua Jieyu nodded. Delectable, many people praised after seeing Zhuge Mingyue standing with Hua Jieyu. Qi Meng of the Demon God clan. At that time, someone's eyes fell somewhere behind Hua Jieyu on a youth. He had a beastly figure and a blood-red line between his brows. It looked extremely demonic and was the mark of the Demon Gold clan. The Barren Road is here too. The people looked towards yet another direction. The mass of strong cultivators had arrived. They came from 9 different directions. There were many talented figures amongst the sea of people. When the people of large forces saw their juniors, they smiled faintly. At that time, Chen Yuan appeared somewhere with an elder beside him. It was the leader of the Zhaixing house with a youth beside him, Mu Zhifan. Chen Yuan, you're the only one here from the top 3 schools. Why are you so active? Are you waiting for Yi Futian? He's talented, but you think he can survive the holy road with his cultivation? The head of the Zhaixing house said mockingly. These two were old rivals. He was still angry about how Chen Yuan had taken Yi Futian into the Zhaixing house to take the polearm. You don't have to worry, Chen Yuan said coolly. Zhiqiu is also in the Dawn Road. You better pray that the guy didn't run into Zhiqiu. Otherwise, the polearm would probably be back with the Zhaixing house, the man said, laughing. He seemed very confident. When Mu Zhiqiu entered the holy road, she was already in the noble plain. He was free, so he decided to visit the holy Ji palace. After all, Mu Zhifan was also cultivating here. Chen Yuan gazed at the head of the Zhaixing house and gave an ambiguous smile. What are you smiling about? The head of the Zhaixing house asked after seeing Chen Yuan's odd expression. You shouldn't pray that they meet. Your granddaughter is quite pretty. I heard that the son of my school isn't only talented in cultivation. Chen Yuan smirked. The head of the Zhaixing house's expression changed and he scoffed. Don't speak nonsense. Your little heir isn't qualified. Zhiqiu will become a disciple of the holy Ji palace, like Zhifan. There are many people cultivating on the 1,000 holy islands. He's just a disciple on an island. What are you so proud about? Chen Yuan mocked. How many from your school has entered the holy Ji palace? The other shot back. Neither let each other go. They argued, tit for tat, attracting much attention. Those that could come all had extraordinary statuses. Not even sages could come if they wanted, but these 2 old guys were arguing. At that time, people gradually walked over from the distance. Chen Yuan and the head of the Zhaixing house stopped arguing. They looked at the incoming group. The Dawn Road's people had finally arrived. They attracted a lot of eyes too. Just then, a huge figure started walking over. It was a huge golden ape. Seeing its appearance, Chen Yuan and the Zhaixing house head stared hard at it too. They knew that this was the Golden Great Ape clan from Mount Taixing in the center region. They ruled Mount Taixing and were a frightening force. The mountain leader was at the front of the barren sky rank 2. There was a stone wall in the distance, above the steps to the holy Ji palace. An extraordinary elder stood there. His features were very sharp. He looked into the direction of the Dawn Road. A group of strong cultivators arrived before him. They also looked there with pained expressions. Elder Ning Huang was killed. They must have used lowly tricks. Otherwise, with Ning Huang's abilities, how could it be possible? We must take revenge, someone murmured. The elder scanned him coldly and said with authority, This is the holy Ji palace, so you better be obedient. Otherwise, no one can protect you. Then I'll wait for when we leave. But Elder Ning, the one who killed Ning Huang, can't become a disciple of the holy Ji palace. These were from the Ning family. They'd been waiting for a long time, filled with anticipation, but only received the news that Ning Huang had died. Elder Ning huffed. He scanned the people coldly. The only one he had hoped for to take his place had been killed. This upset him greatly. From what I know, the one who killed Ning Huang is from the Eastern Barren territory and is close to Zhuge Mingyue of the Zhuge family. Think more clearly, Elder Ning said. He glanced at the Zhuge family and then at the beautiful figure still playing his guqin. Right then, in Zhuge Mingyue's direction, Hua Jieyu looked over at the Dawn Road cultivators. Zhuge Mingyue smiled at her. She knew what Hua Jieyu was waiting for. Would that guy really be with the Dawn Road? Then a group of figures came over in the sky from the Dawn Road's direction. The instant she saw a handsome figure amongst them, Zhuge Mingyue smiled brightly. Indeed. Hua Jieyu looked with her pretty eyes and saw the one she'd been missing every day. A beautiful smile bloomed on her face. Many people gaped at her as if her smile was the only thing in the world. Ha! Zhuge Mingyu chuckled softly and then an odd expression filled her eyes. He's still like before. He was surrounded by pretty girls. He really knows how to enjoy himself. As expected of our junior. Zhuge Mingyue giggled. Finally, Hua Jieyu noticed the people around Yi Futian. She obviously knew Lulan Shui, but there was also Qin Yin and Li Qingyi behind him. They were pretty, but not beautiful. But there was also Gu Yunxi with beauty worth a city's treasures. Mu Zhiqiu was even more beautiful. She looked a fairy, standing there quietly. Hua Jieyu blinked and her smile turned resentful. This guy hadn't changed at all. Chapter 540, That's Too Much. Zhuge Mingyue smiled and continued, surrounded by beauties, what a contented life. That's too much. Zhuge Mingyue smiled and continued, surrounded by beauties, what a contented life. Yes. Hua Jieyu nodded with a grievance. After much anticipation, she had finally met him again, but under such a situation. Should I call out to him? Zhuge Mingyue asked. I don't know him. Hua Jieyu pretended to be angry and looked away, but she continued to peek in his direction. She saw him talking happily to the beauty beside him with a bright smile. Jieyu, I'll introduce someone more outstanding to you next time. Let's not care about that heartless man anymore. Zhuge Mingyue nodded seriously. Ah! Hua Jieyu blinked and looked at Zhuge Mingyue, but she heard Beitang Xing'er say, Second sister, little brother is so handsome and outstanding, there will definitely be many girls who like him. Maybe it's not little brother's fault. Xing'er, whose side are you on? Zhuge Mingyue grinned, looking at Beitang Xing'er. Beixing Tanger smiled and scratched her ear, while Hua Jieyu said in a touching tone to Zhuge Mingyue, Sister, maybe what Xing'er said isn't wrong. Zhuge Mingyue blinked and grinned at Hua Jieyu. She had not even punished him yet. She was really hopeless. Hua Jieyu blushed shyly like Zhuge Mingyue had seen her thoughts. It made her look even more attractive, but that fellow was really too much. One or two would be fine, but he had 4 beauties by his side. Presently, Yi Futian did not notice anything. His gaze landed on the Holy Ji Palace's spectacular sky stairwell, on the teen playing the guqin. The guqin melody sounded sweet and it was extremely familiar. He had practiced the same piece too many times. Yu Sheng and Yi Wuchen's gaze also looked towards that direction. Yi Futian looked towards Mu Zhiqiu and Yuan Zhan who were beside him and asked, Who is he? Mu Zhiqiu looked towards the teen in all his glory, sitting quietly there, yet looking as though he had merged with the heavens. His cultivation level was likely very high, and to be in the Holy Ji Palace at such a young age. Even though she had only seen him for the first time, she could guess his identity. There were very few of such people in the barren state. His impressive demeanor could be seen from one look and he stood out from the rest. If I'm not wrong, he is the young city lord of the White Cloud City, Bai Luli, Mu Zhiqiu replied quietly. Yi Futian stared at him and smiled, he is indeed an exceptional person. I heard that young city lord Bai has entered the top 10 of the barren sky ranking. Yes. Mu Zhiqiu nodded. Although Bai Luli's cultivation level was not high, his prodigious talent had already obtained the recognition of the barren state's people. His future was sure to be bright. No wonder he can express such imagery through the piece. Yi Futian smiled. The piece that Bai Luli was playing was one of the top 10 pieces of the divine prefecture, the Ukiyo. Although it was only the first half of the piece, the imagery was already divine. Yi Futian admitted that even if he was the one playing, he could not do better. With regards to how the young city lord Bai obtained the Yukio score, he was not surprised. Back then, he had left the score in the Eastern Baron College. As long as an expert from an elite faction went there, they would be able to get it. With Bai Luli's background, even if the White Cloud City did not go to get it, it would not be difficult to get his hands on the score. What did the top 10 of the Baron Sky ranking mean? It meant that the people of the Baron State viewed Bai Luli as one of the 10 most outstanding people in the Baron State. Which direction is the Nether Road in? Yi Futian suddenly asked. Previously, the Yukio had caught his attention, but Yi Futian naturally would not forget about being able to meet Jeyu and his second sister. The crowd's gaze moved towards one of the 9 directions and Mu Jiqiu said, "It appears to be there." Yi Futian looked towards that direction and scanned through the crowd in a distant location. He soon saw a beautiful figure looking at him with a weird grin. Her smile gave Yi Futian the chills. He was extremely familiar with that smile. Back in the cottage, whenever he saw that smile, 4th or 5th brother would be in trouble. Second sister. Yi Futian mumbled, then saw the girl standing next to Zhuge Mingyue. He saw Hua Jieyu avoiding his gaze and he did a double take. Something was wrong. How could Jieyu not miss him? If second sister had seen him, it wasn't possible that Jieyu didn't. He saw Beitang Xinger winking at him and Yi Futian had a realization. As though he had suddenly thought of something, he froze and looked to his left. Gu Yunxi was standing quietly there. He looked to his right. Mu Jiqiu was beside him speaking to him intimately. Oh no! Yi Futian was dumbfounded. This was bad. Could he be blamed for this? Being too outstanding was a mistake as well. Jiqiu, Yunxi, you have to help me explain later on. Yi Futian said. Mu Jiqiu gave him a confused look while Gu Yunxi's eyes sparkled. Could it be? Jiqiu. At that moment, a voice sounded. Just as Yi Futian was about to walk over to Jieyu, he saw Qin Yuan and the Zhaixing House chief walking over to him. The Zhaixing House chief was glaring at Mu Jiqiu sternly. He was still arguing with Qin Yuan about this matter just now, and what did he see now? Mu Jiqiu was actually quietly standing beside Yi Futian. What was happening? Grandfather, Mu Jiqiu called out to him. Jiqiu, have you taken back the polearm of divine destruction? Mu Jifan's expression was grim. That day, when Yi Futian had taken the polearm of divine destruction, he had also arrived, but Yuan Chen's threat allowed Yi Futian to take it away. Mu Jiqiu immediately understood why her grandfather and brother looked unhappy and lowered her head in guilty. She had wanted to take it, but she had been defeated by Yi Futian again. However, her action made the Zhaixing House chief and Mu Jifan's expressions become even grimmer. Was this her silent confession? Could it be? What is going on? The Zhaixing House chief was extremely irritated. Futian, nice job. On the other hand, Qin Yuan was full of smiles and looked at Yi Futian appreciatively. Previously, the Gu clan leader had shared some thoughts with him. That was when he knew that the son he had picked was talented in other fields on top of his cultivation. Looking at the lineup Yi Futian had, he had to admit that he was impressed. The frigid beauty of the Zhaixing House had been won over by him. Impressive. Yi Futian blinked in suspicion. Could there have been a misunderstanding? Why did the Zhaixing House chief look like he wanted to tear him from limb to limb? Even when he first took the polearm of divine destruction, he didn't act like this. He looked at Yi Futian and said, Hua Jieyu, cultivating in the Zhuge clan, Zhuge Mingyue's sworn younger sister, a divine spiritual sorcerer, your girlfriend? Yi Futian looked at Mu Jifan's expression and was irritated. He had been looked down upon. Don't create trouble for yourself, Mu Jiqiu advised him softly. This kind of joke was not to be casually made. If he was heard by the people from the Zhuge clan, they would not let Yi Futian off. That's right, brother Yi, it's best not to joke about this. Behind him, Xia Wuji and the rest tried to persuade him as well. Yi Futian rubbed the peak of his nose, then walked forward. He was actually walking in the direction of the Nether Road. The crowd looked at him with weird expressions. Gu Yunxi's gaze had been on Hua Jieyu all this while. She had previously heard Yi Futian say that he had a girlfriend. She was always imagining what kind of remarkable girl Yi Futian's girlfriend would be. Now that she saw Hua Jieyu, she was like the beauty in her imagination, a goddess. As she thought of it, Gu Yunxi smiled brightly. Only this type of girl could be a good fit for him. At that moment, numerous gazes landed on Yi Futian as he walked gradually towards the nether road. Zhuge Mingyue and Beitang Xing'er saw him walking over. Hua Jieyu also looked at him, then turned away. This fellow actually dared to touch other girls in front of her, shameless. Finally, Yi Futian walked over to the nether road area. He walked in front of the three of them and smiled jovially. The two of them looked at him with a weird grimace, then looked towards Hua Jieyu. Yi Futian saw that Hua Jieyu was not looking at him and was a little guilty. He said in a small voice, "Jieyu, I missed you so much." As his voice landed, the entire space fell silent. It started from the nether road, then the other places as well. Countless gazes fell on them. Yi Futian's voice was not loud, but because of Zhuge Mingyue and Hua Jieyu, many people's attention was on them and they had heard what he said. What did he say to Hua Jieyu? Do you have a death wish? Mu Jifan's expression was frosty. He had been paying attention to what was happening all the while. I don't know you. Hua Jieyu glared at Yi Futian with a pained expression. Evidently, she was still angry. However, the crowd did not pay close attention to Hua Jieyu's expression and only heard his words. In an instant, many people looked coldly at Yi Futian. What an impudent fellow. Where did this idiot come from? Someone even said mockingly. Hua Jieyu frowned. Even though she was feigning anger, she could not bear to hear others humiliate Yi Futian. Sigh, I've come such a long way to find you, how heartbreaking. Yi Futian sighed. Hua Jieyu turned around and glared at him resentfully. Who was the one being wronged now? As she thought of this, she took small steps towards Yi Futian. The numerous gazes froze as they saw Hua Jieyu walk to Yi Futian's side. Afterward, under their stunned supervision, Hua Jieyu stretched out her arm and helped Yi Futian to straighten his messy clothes with the gentleness of a lover. She had a look of helplessness in her eyes, and her gaze turned towards the dawn road and said pitifully, "Who are they? Am I not good enough? Tell me, I'll change." Seeing the alluring beauty before him, Yi Futian felt as though he was about to melt. However, why did he have an ominous premonition? Chapter 541. At that moment, under the Holy Ji Palace, countless people's attention gathered towards where Yi Futian was. This was especially true for the disciples of elite clans and factions. Now, Hua Jieyu, who was extremely famous among the younger generation, had a boyfriend. At that moment, under the Holy Ji Palace, countless people's attention gathered towards where Yi Futian was. This was especially true for the disciples of elite clans and factions. Now, Hua Jieyu, who was extremely famous among the younger generation, had a boyfriend. This is too much, Zhuge Mingyue smiled faintly and said. Beixing Tanger did a double take and asked softly, "Second sister, will younger brother be in trouble now?" "I don't know." Zhuge Mingyue smiled. Beside her, Zhuge Xing's gaze landed on Yi Futian, a strange expression appearing on his face. As a younger generation of the Zhuge clan, he naturally knew that Yi Futian had a boyfriend who was one of the disciples of the Eastern Baron State's cottage. However, this was the first time he had seen Yi Futian and he was indeed handsome. But if Hua Jieyu only focused on appearances, she would be too shallow. Among the Dawn Road's crowd, Chief Chen had a weird look on his face. It seemed like he had underestimated Yi Futian's potential. Impressive. Mu Jifan's expression was extremely somber. What a slap to his face. He should have been happy that Yi Futian had a girlfriend. However, when he saw that the girl was Hua Jieyu, he was unable to do so. Not because he was interested in Hua Jieyu, but because when Yi Futian first took the polearm of divine destruction away, he had been arrogant in front of Yi Futian. He was a disciple of the Holy Ji Palace and would take back the polearm sooner or later. However, now that Yi Futian had crossed the divine road to get here, was on good terms with Yuan Zhan of the Golden Ape clan and had Hua Jieyu as his girlfriend. This made him extremely dissatisfied. Mu Jiqiu, Gu Yunqi, Qin Yin and the other girls looked towards them. It was as though they had never really seen Yi Futian's true colors. Mu Chuan, do you want to consider my offer? Since your favorite granddaughter is already by Yi Futian's side, why don't you join me in supporting the successor of the Saint Path? Chen Yuan asked the Zhaixing house chief. Mu Chuan glared at him and replied, in your dreams. How stubborn, you can't even see as clearly as your descendants. Yi Futian was only in the Arcana plane when he entered the Dawn Road. Look at the people who have gathered around him, your granddaughter, the younger generation of Mount Taixing, can't you see who is at the core of the group? Chen Yuan said nonchalantly. After a few years, you might not even have the chance to get close. You think I care? The Zhaixing house chief scoffed. With who he was, so what if Yi Futian would become strong? You may not cherish it, but when the time comes, the Saint Path will crush your Zhaixing house, Chen Yuan said disdainfully. You can try, Chuan Mu stared at Chen Yuan and said. You think I dare not? Both of them glared at each other. At that moment, Yi Futian was being stared at by countless people, sending shivers down his spine. Seeing the charming beauty in front of him look at him wistfully, Yi Futian felt a conspiracy being plotted. Jieyu, these are all my friends. I'll ask them to explain to you later, don't misunderstand. Yi Futian was apprehensive. If you like them, just tell me. I don't have any objections, Hua Jieyu said gently, acting extremely feminine. Ah! Yi Futian blinked and saw Hua Jieyu grinning at him. He had the chills, so he smiled and said, definitely not. Feeling as though his answer wasn't sincere enough, Yi Futian added, I swear. Hua Jieyu smiled ravishingly and was pleased. Looks like I've passed the test. Yi Futian saw Hua Jieyu's pleased smile and heaved a sigh of relief. As expected of the fox, she was hard to deal with, it took both brains and brawn to placate her. Jieyu, why are there so many people looking at us speak? Yi Futian glanced at the surroundings and asked. I don't know. Hua Jieyu shook her head. Is it because I'm too handsome? Yi Futian asked in a hushed voice. Yes, it must be. Hua Jieyu smiled and nodded. The two of them held hands like nobody was watching, and walked towards Zhuge Mingyue. It was not that they were high profile, it was just that they could not control themselves after meeting for so long. Even though they had already spoken softly, they were unable to help that so many people had noticed them. Second sister, Sister Xing'er, I've missed the two of you, Yi Futian looked at Zhuge Mingyue and said. Really? Zhuge Mingyue replied, smiling at Yi Futian. Why did she feel that his words were hypocritical? He probably only missed Jieyu. It's absolutely true. Ever since sister left the cottage, I've often missed the days when you were at the cottage and felt as though something was missing. Soon, I left the Eastern Barren state to look for you. Now that I've seen that second sister has gotten more beautiful, I'm at ease now, Yi Futian said earnestly. Your words are so sweet that I almost believed them, Zhuge Mingyue replied, looking at Yi Futian. This fellow was still such a sweet talker, even after 2 years. Nothing had changed. Beitang Xing'er stood at the side, smiling gently. She was naturally happy to see Yi Futian. Back then in the cottage, the senior brothers and sisters all doted on him the most. Shameless. Many of the Zhuge clan members and Nether Road geniuses looked at Yi Futian with contempt. Was that how this bastard managed to win Hua Jieyu over? Such a glib mouth, how could a cultivator be this shameless? If it was only Hua Jieyu, it would be fine, but even Zhuge Mingyue fell for that? Sigh. Women. Little Shi, did you take good care of your little brother? Zhuge Mingyue saw Yi Shaoshi walking over and asked, smiling. Yi Shaoshi saw the difference between Yi Futian and his treatment and was infuriated, but when he met his second sister's gaze, he lowered his head and continued, naturally took good care of him. Little brother, is that the truth? Zhuge Mingyue looked at Yi Futian and asked. Seventh brother's performance was indeed passable, Yi Futian smiled and replied, causing Zhuge Mingyue to nod her head in satisfaction. The fatty sighed in his heart, who is the big brother here? Sister, what about fourth and fifth brother? Yi Futian asked. Previously, Shui Yi and Luo Fan had come to the barren state alongside Yi Shaoshi, claiming that they wanted to find second sister. Now that Yi Shaoshi was here, where had the two of them gone? The two of them were lazing around, so I found something for them to do, Zhuge Mingyue replied. Yi Shaoshi shrunk back, thinking of his two seniors. He felt that his treatment was still all right. Seeing Yi Shaoshi's response, Yi Futian knew that his two seniors were probably in a sorry state. Looking for second sister for no good reason, they were just looking for trouble. Did they think that they were him? What about third brother, have you seen him, second sister? Yi Futian also thought about Gu Donglu. The smile on Zhuge Mingyue's face faded, and she replied, don't mention him, trying to show off after he had just broken through his cultivation level. He was defeated by Bai Luli, I don't know where he's gone off to cultivate after that. Yi Futian looked at his second sister's expression, it looked like she was worried for his third brother. His gaze turned towards another direction and Yi Futian looked at the outstanding figure by the Holy Ji Palace's sky stairwell, the White Cloud City's young city lord Bai Luli. Being able to enter the barren sky rankings top 10 at such a young age, how could he be defeated easily? Knowing third brother's personality, he was probably off somewhere cultivating hard. At that moment, in the direction of the sky stairwell, there were important figures descending from the Holy Ji Palace. Their gazes swept across the vast area and wherever they looked, there were people. It was a sight to behold. Moreover, this was the group that had already passed the Holy Road selection, or there would be a terrifying amount of people. This was the Holy Ji Palace's triennial disciples selection, a spectacle of the barren state. Apart from a few stubborn fellows from the Alchemy City and the barren state Northern Continent's Holy Temple region, the vast majority of the barren state's factions would participate. This was the influence that the Holy Ji Palace had built up over the years, even the demon god clan experts were willing to come forth. At that moment, numerous gazes looked towards the direction of the sky stairwell. They heard an expert from the Holy Ji Palace say, the Holy Ji Palace will be selecting its disciples now. Those who are not involved, step out from the central region. Once his voice landed, many figures retreated, even the influential figures from all areas retreated out of the central region. Those from the 9 holy roads, assume your positions, the expert on the sky stairwell continued. Yi Futian held Hua Jieyu's hand and said, I'll go over first. Okay. Hua Jieyu nodded gently. Yi Futian and Yi Shaoshi left, walking in the direction of the Dawn Road. In the Holy Ji Palace's triennial admission, they would open up 9 holy roads, namely the Barren Road, Dawn Road, Travel Road, Nether Road, State Road, Arid Road, Separation Road, Frost Road, and Decay Road. Out of the 9 roads, only the Barren Road corresponded with Zhongzhou City. The other 8 roads corresponded with the 8 major bearings of the barren state. At that moment, in the extensive area, there were 9 words inscribed in the 9 major bearings. Yi Futian and the people from the Dawn Road stood in the region where the Dawn word was. They looked like a huge army. Even after the elimination from the Holy Road, there were still countless figures standing. The disorganized area became much more orderly and distinct. Among the 9 holy roads, it was the most evident that the Dawn Road had the most people. This caused many people to think, looks like the competition in the Dawn Road this time wasn't that fierce. The fiercer the competition over the holy badges in the Holy Road, the fewer people could stay until the end. However, the crowd was unaware that what had happened in the Dawn Road was unlike the other holy roads. When Yi Futian returned, Mu Zhiqiu, Gu Yunxi and the rest continued to stand by his side. Li Qingyi looked at the geniuses from the 9 holy roads, then looked towards the sky stairwell and the Holy Ji Palace's prodigies. She knew that her journey was coming to an end. She did not have expectations to enter the Holy Ji Palace to cultivate. Simply being able to see such a scene was enough to make her satisfied. All the most outstanding figures of the generation from the barren state had gathered here. At that moment, Zhuge Mingyue walked towards a place at the side of the sky stairwell. Over there, countless figures had appeared and one of them had a prominent aura. Yi Futian had seen him before in the cottage. It was Zhuge Kanyang, who had been to the cottage to receive his second sister. He was also an extremely famous figure in the Baron state and the successor to the Zhuge clan. Has he come? Zhuge Kanyang asked Zhuge Mingyue. Yes. Zhuge Mingyue nodded lightly. In these 2 years, you have protected Hua Jieyu so well, just to wait for him. Now that he has chosen to step through the holy road and appear on this stage, I hope that he lives up to your expectations, Zhuge Kanyang said softly. Chapter 542. At the foot of the Holy Ji Palace, the experts from the 9 holy roads stood cautiously. They all knew that the holy road was merely the first stage of the selection. Walking out from the holy road did not mean that they were a disciple of the Holy Ji Palace. It was far too early. At the foot of the Holy Ji Palace, the experts from the 9 holy roads stood cautiously. They all knew that the holy road was merely the first stage of the selection. Walking out from the holy road did not mean that they were a disciple of the Holy Ji Palace. It was far too early. They had walked out of the holy road, only to arrive here and obtain the qualification to enter the Holy Ji Palace, simply that. What would follow would be crueler. The geniuses from the 9 holy roads had gathered. What a spectacle it would be to behold. On both sides of the sky stairwell, experts could be seen standing. Due to the sky stairwell being too long, even though there were many experts on the steps, they still appeared to be scattered, many of them appearing alone in a direction. There were those like Bai Luli playing the Guqin piece, like Zhuge Kanyang and Zhuge Mingyue observing silently, and those who were drinking tea and watching. Now, many influential figures from the Holy Ji Palace had arrived because it involved the selection of their disciples. The Holy Ji Palace's entrance examinations were different from many other factions. The Holy Ji Palace's elders would personally select those they valued, unlike a mass admission. Only those who were valued by the sage plane figures had the qualification to step foot on the 1000 Holy Island. For those who wanted to become a disciple on the core island, they would have to be selected by an extraordinary sage plane figure. It was exactly because of this that the entire Baron State's geniuses gathered for the Holy Ji Palace's triennial entrance examinations. However, the Holy Ji Palace would not take in many disciples as the Holy Ji Palace's influential figures had extremely high expectations. They had seen far too many geniuses, so it was not easy even to enter the 1000 Holy Island, not to mention becoming a core island disciple. Of course, before the many influential figures took their pick, there were still too many people from the 9 holy roads. There needed to be another round to eliminate the majority of the survivors. Because of that, an elder on the sky stairwell announced, "Those who have walked out of the 9 holy roads, step forward." The Holy Ji Palace's elders will personally take their pick, but before that, a huge portion of you will be eliminated. The crowd nodded in understanding. It was no surprise to them as many people had already known about the Holy Ji Palace's entrance examination rules. Tens of thousands of cultivators had entered the 9 holy roads. How were the influential figures of the Holy Ji Palace going to decide? Evidently, there needed to be a mass elimination. From the 9 bearings, everyone stepped forward into the vast area in the middle of the 9 words. At that moment, a blinding light emitted from the 9 words signifying the 9 holy roads and turned into light veils. Following that, the entire area lit up with a holographic glow, causing the area to look like a giant battlefield, spanning tens of thousands of meters. A normal human's vision could not even see the edge of the battlefield. However, all those who had gathered here were cultivators with extremely high cultivation levels, so sight was not an issue to them. Tens of thousands of meters was a mere stone's throw for them. At that moment, the 9 words appeared to transform into 9 doors, with an expert guarding each door. All of you have stepped out from the holy road and have a holy badge in your hands. Some of you have relied on your strength while others may have used schemes. Regardless of how you did it, the Holy Ji Palace will not interfere. However, in this battlefield, there will only be 3,000 people standing at the end. You may all use your methods and there are no restrictions. Those who concede can raise their holy badges and no one is to attack you. Step out from the 9 bearings, that is the exit. After you have stepped out, return your holy badge to the people from the Holy Ji Palace. the expert on the sky stairwell continued. The crowd was astounded. This time's elimination would be a battle royale. The tens of thousands of geniuses from the 9 holy roads would be reduced to only 3,000 within this battlefield. The remaining 3,000 would be the true prodigies from all corners of the barren state. Averaging out the 9 holy roads, each holy road would have about 300 people. Keeping in mind that every holy road represented countless geniuses from a certain region of the barren state, from numerous major clans, schools, and sections, 300 people was simply a mere fraction of a clan's young experts. I have to remind you all that you had better start making preparations now. Otherwise, when I announce the start of the elimination, you might not even know how you died, the expert on the sky stairwell shouted. Immediately, many people's expression became alert and shied away from others, trying to prevent others from sneaking up on them. Although the battlefield was huge, when that many experts gathered inside, it still appeared cramped. That was why, once the battle erupted, it would be mass chaos. The people around you could attack at any time, so you would not even be able to select an opponent. Only those extremely strong cultivators could dominate the area around them and aim for their targets. At the foot of the Holy Ji Palace, at the edge of the giant island, it was eerily quiet within and outside the battlefield. Everyone was focused, watching the battlefield. The most outstanding cultivators from the 9 holy roads naturally received the most attention. Yi Futian also had many gazes on him. There were many people who were worried about him. Zhuge Mingyue had high hopes for him. Back then, Gu Donglu had personally gone to the Kangyi kingdom to invite their little brother, so he had not experienced any entrance challenge. Now, there was such a huge scene to enter the Holy Ji Palace. She did not know if her little brother could make it through with his cultivation level. Although she was exceptionally confident in Yi Futian's potential, she was still a little worried. After all, Yi Futian's cultivation level was rather low and she knew what level Yi Futian was at 2 years ago when she had left the cottage. On the battlefield, Yi Futian was among the youngest. If he waited another 3 years, perhaps her little brother would be unparalleled, but at that time his cultivation level might have already surpassed the lower noble plane and be unable to take part in the Holy Ji Palace's entrance examination. Chen Yuan also looked in Yi Futian's direction. In the colossal battlefield, Yi Futian appeared minute. How would the prodigy of the divine sky city that could dominate his generation fare on the stage of the barren state? What kind of brilliance would he show? He raised his head towards the direction of the Holy Ji Palace. He knew that many influential figures had come today, including some of the people on the barren sky ranking. Who among them would select Yi Futian? In another direction, the golden ape from Mount Taixing also looked in Yi Futian's direction. Yuan Zhan had just told him some things that made him extremely surprised. At that moment, in the battlefield, Yi Futian told the people around him, "Follow me closely. I'm not intending to participate in the battle, this place is not for me." Li Qingyi smiled and replied. She was already satisfied enough to have reached here. "I'm afraid that I will only be a burden to you in this battle. I'd better step out." Gu Yunxi smiled gently. Long Mu and the rest sighed. Middle Arcana plane cultivators could still have some opportunities in the Holy Road, but here, there was no opportunity to be had. All right. Giving up in this kind of scenario is nothing to be ashamed of. Yi Futian nodded. After that, he saw Gu Yunxi, Li Qingyi, and many others walking with their holy badge to the exit. When the battle began, they would immediately step out and watch the battle. Not just them, but many others made a similar decision at present as well. Previously, many disciples from major factions had followed their peers into the Holy Road and were protected all the way. Now, that method would not work. If they did not have the ability, staying was pointless. "Begin," the elder on the sky stairwell announced. As his voice landed, terrifying auras started to burst out in the battlefield and the spiritual chi in the air rampaged. Many people walked out of the exit. These were the people who voluntarily conceded. There were a few people who flew into the air. The people who dared to do so were all elite geniuses. In the sea of people, flying in the air would make them easy targets for those on the ground, and nobody would be so arrogant without enough confidence. Yi Futian's gaze swept across the spacious battlefield. His vision was drowned out by the crowd and he could not see where Hua Jieyu was. Around him, nobody attacked Yi Futian's group. After all, they were in the gathering area for the Dawn Road's experts, and who in the Dawn Road did not know Yi Futian? Even the elite geniuses like Yan Zhou did not dare to move recklessly. The polearm of divine destruction in his hand, Yi Futian flew into the air, his gaze sweeping around the surroundings. In the air, there were others like him, brimming with confidence. A distance away, from the direction of the separation road, there was an icy gaze that fixed itself on Yi Futian with killing intent. There was a group of experts who were covered in flames, and there was a fearsome dark will in one of the experts' flames. That was the Holy Fire Clan's gathering area and Du Ao was within. Back then, Du Ao had led a group of Holy Fire Clan's experts into the Eastern Barren territory, forcing Yi Futian to climb the Sky Mountain with them. Du Ao had nearly died in the hands of Yi Futian's demon bird. He bore the grudge all this time. Now, at the foot of the Barren State's Holy Ji Palace, he had met Yi Futian once again. Yuan Zhan, Jiqiu, how much do you know about the Separation Road's Holy Fire Clan? Yi Futian asked. Not much. Yuan Zhan and Mu Jiqiu both shook their heads. What will happen if I kill one of the Holy Fire Clan's disciples? Yi Futian asked again. In the mass chaos, it is common for people to die. If you kill a normal disciple from the Holy Fire Clan, they might just accept that their disciple's strength was inferior to yours. However, it is possible that the person you kill has connections with elders in the Holy Fire Clan, and that might get you marked. Mu Jiqiu continued, of course, if you are highly valued by an influential figure of the Holy Ji clan and enter the palace to cultivate, there will be no repercussions. I understand. Yi Futian nodded, as he saw Du Ao walking in the air towards him. He moved in a flash towards the ground and looked at Du Ao, as though intentionally avoiding him. Du Ao's killing intent was rampaging. Someone tried to attack him, but the imposing dark flames surrounding his body shot towards the person and enveloped him, causing the person to ignite with no chance to even surrender. Trying to escape. Du Ao looked ruthlessly at Yi Futian, who was in the crowd. Yi Futian and Zhuge Mingyue were closely related, but even if he could not kill him, he would disable him permanently. At the same time, a cruel killing intent appeared in Yi Futian's eyes. Back then, in the Eastern Barren territory, it was Du Ao who had given the order to eliminate the Donghua clan. Even though the Donghua clan lord and his wife had agreed to disband the clan, they were hunted by Du Ao, and he even chased them all the way to the college and killed them in front of the people in the college. And the cause of it all was because Du Ao had wanted Hua Qingqing's body. On the Sky Mountain, he had almost humiliated her but was saved by Yi Futian's demon bird. It was also that incident that had caused a pure girl like Hua Qingqing to go into Buddhism. Although Yi Futian and the Donghua clan were enemies back then, what Du Ao did in the Eastern Barren territory was still deserving of death. Chapter 543, It was chaos in the vast battlefield at this very moment. Tens of thousands of powerful cultivators battled within. One could only focus on the enemies right before them, there was no choosing one's opponent. The number of people that failed was increasingly rapidly as well. A constant stream of people left the battlefield, having admitted defeat. It was chaos in the vast battlefield at this very moment. Tens of thousands of powerful cultivators battled within. One could only focus on the enemies right before them, there was no choosing one's opponent. The number of people that failed was increasingly rapidly as well. A constant stream of people left the battlefield, having admitted defeat. Many important figures observed the ongoing events from the top of the sky stairwell and the other side of the battlefield. Naturally, the insanely powerful geniuses whose talents were top-notch got the most attention. Bai Zhe from White Cloud City, who was the younger brother of Bai Luli, was an obvious target for observation. He was mind-bogglingly talented, and as he stood proudly in the sky, no one dared to approach him. It was clear to all that some people were simply not to be trifled with. Qi Meng from the Demon God clan marched into the crowd. His arms were powerful as a dragon's, and when he grabbed at the crowd, several cultivators were sent flying. The attacks of those from the Demon God clan have always been savagely violent. Qi Meng was a large burly man. Leading other powerful figures from his clan into the crowd, Qi Meng sent the people around him flying with yet another powerful swing. He was like a tiger charging into a flock of sheep. No one was able to hold their ground against him. The insanely powerful figures of Zhongzhou City were also under great scrutiny. At this moment, streaks of golden light gleamed from the middle of the crowd. The light was especially dazzling and attracted countless gazes. Several extravagantly dressed young men stood there, bathed in a sovereign glow. Streaks of light swept across the place, turning into dragons and phoenixes. No one could defend against them. The young man in the center of that group had an impossible elegance to his features. His aura was unmatched by most people. This young man was Huang Jiuge, an insanely powerful figure of Zhongzhou City's sovereign family. The sovereign family was one of the most powerful families in Zhongzhou City and even the barren state. They were so powerful that even the prestige of the Holy Ji Palace meant little to them. They claimed to be descendants of Ren Huang, and were arrogant beyond measure, calling themselves the sovereign family. But everyone else thought that the sovereign family thought too highly of themselves. There were countless powerful figures in the world. The vast divine prefecture may have figures like the emperor and Ren Huang, but the barren state did not have the capacity to contain such figures. However, the people of the barren state still recognized the strength of the sovereign family. Those from the sovereign family who had come to the divine road were not aiming to enter the Holy Ji Palace to train. Instead, their motivation was to see the talent the barren state had to offer and to barrel through all competition effortlessly in order to prove how powerful the sovereign family was. It was also a good opportunity for them to train and improve their own abilities. Other than the sovereign family, those from the Tingxue house in Zhongzhou were equally frightening as well. Murderous energy emanated from an area in the battlefield. Those from the Tingxue house were carrying out vicious attacks there. A large empty space quickly emerged around them. The people around them had fallen to the ground, defeated and bloodied. No one else dared to approach those from the Tingxue house. The Shiman clan and the Lightning Court were also one of the most influential powers in Zhongzhou City. Their younger generations of members were all brilliant, and they wanted to take this opportunity to shine amongst their peers by defeating them all. But they had not started clashing with each other yet. This large messy free-for-all was but the first stage of elimination. The real battles lay towards the end. As such, they were not too hasty about things, knowing that the fight now was only a prelude to greater things at the end. Other than the powerful figures from the three different paths of the Divine Road who were under the most scrutiny, there were other insanely talented people from the other paths as well. The abundance of talented people on the battlefield made it a dizzying sight to see. There were so many powerful figures, and they had not even displayed their full abilities yet. In the battlefield, the 9 swords glinted behind Yanzhou, and after scaring the competition, no one else dared to touch him again. The same went for many powerful figures from the mortal world and Nantian house. Their gazes turned towards Yi Futian, who was being hunted down, and a peculiar expression settled on their faces. When Yi Futian wielded the divine destruction polearm, his battle ability was definitely top-notch. And with Yuan Zhan and Yi Shaoshi by his side, he had no need to run from being hunted down. Chu Shang from the mortal world and Nan Feng from the Nantian house knew about the bad blood between Du Ao and Yi Futian. The Sacred Fire sect had gone to the eastern region of the barren state as well back then, and Du Ao seemed to still be unaware of Yi Futian's abilities now. Watching Du Ao chase after Yi Futian into the chaos alone, they knew that Du Ao was in trouble. Yi Futian was obviously sure of what he was doing. Hua Jieyu stood in the sky. She was watching Yi Futian as well. However, the battlefield was chaotic, and her sight was obscured at times. Yi Futian seemed to be intentionally heading towards the center of the crowd as well. He seems to be being chased, Zhuge Xing commented, looking over at Hua Jieyu who was next to him. Do you need me to do anything? There's no need, Hua Jieyu replied calmly, not looking at Zhuge Xing. She saw that Yi Shaoshi was not rushing to defend Yi Futian. Since the cottage disciple was not worried, she understood that Yi Shaoshi believed in Yi Futian's ability to solve this himself. Yi Futian was probably intending to take revenge on behalf of Du Ao's victim back then. Looking at Hua Jieyu's profile, Zhuge Xing did not comment any further. He turned back to where Yi Futian was. Yi Futian had run to the middle of the chaotic battlefield on the dried-up path. He saw the gleam of starlight before meteorites began to appear in the sky. It seemed like that part of the sky had been sealed off. Yi Futian stopped and turned to look at Du Ao. Bathed in dark fire, Du Ao was a frightening sight to see. Staring at Yi Futian, he spoke, "Don't worry, I won't kill you. At most, I'll just permanently destroy your powers. I heard that your girlfriend is a divine spiritual sorcerer now and that she's unmatched in her looks. There are many people out there who want a taste of her. Maybe she'll become someone else's woman once your powers are destroyed." Du Ao leered at Yi Futian. He believed that if it hadn't been for Yi Futian's meddling back then, he would have managed to secure Hua Qingqing, a startling beauty within the eastern region of the barren state. Hua Qingqing was beautiful enough to bring down cities, and she was pure without a single blemish. Her aura was deeply attractive to him. It was a pity that Yi Futian had gotten in his way twice, once on Sky Mountain and the other time at the college. "Do you know why I brought you here?" Yi Futian asked. A flicker of hesitation flashed across Du Ao's face before he asked, smiling, "Why?" "It'll be easier to kill you without anyone following us," came the reply, before a burst of lightning exploded from under Yi Futian's feet. Yi Futian's body swayed to the wind and lightning around him, and shadows of his figure appeared in the sky. It was the thundering illusion step. In an instant, Du Ao felt an incredibly strong surge of noble will descend upon him. Within his mind, it was as if a starry sky had appeared and was pressing down upon him, covering his body and his spiritual will. He felt suffocated. A rumble was heard, and Du Ao's expression changed slightly. He didn't understand how Yi Futian's energy could be so powerful when he clearly hadn't reached the noble plane yet. In his mind, powerful flame intent was released. A dark figure appeared, covered in dark fire that consumed all and pushed back at the immense pressure. At the same time, a shadow of the dark flames appeared behind him. Upon the release of a spell, dark flame dragons arrived in the air towards Yi Futian. The divine destruction polearm whistled through the air with a shocking might. Yi Futian was using the 9 heavenly attacks. It was clear that Yi Futian was aiming for Du Ao's life by using the most powerful technique he had on hand. The flame dragons were reduced to nothing with one strike of the divine destruction polearm. Du Ao's face darkened, before a sage's flame scepter appeared in his hand. Holding the scepter out, endless dark flames began to gather before him and form a giant dark handprint. The handprint was filled with frightening dark flames and could incinerate in an instant if it were to hit someone. The divine destruction polearm was just about to land a strike again when Yi Futian spun in the air and dealt a second attack through the space. The rapid attacks rained down on the handprint, and it exploded. Du Ao's expression completely changed. Since when had Yi Futian become so strong? Back then, Yi Futian had been of a plane way lower than his. Du Ao gripped onto his scepter, and the shadow of the dark flames behind him seemed to solidify into a tangible mass. The dark flames spread rapidly and covered the surrounding space, almost like an invader preparing to massacre a city. At this moment, Yi Futian launched a third strike as he spun in the air. The distance between the two was great, and Du Ao laughed at the fact that Yi Futian was attacking from so far away. But then, he saw that the divine destruction polearm was rapidly increasing in size as it descended upon him like a polearm from heaven. "No!" Du Ao's face contorted in shock as the polearm struck down upon him. His flames may have been strong, but they would not be able to incinerate the polearm. His specialization in flame attacks was being countered squarely by the violence of Yi Futian's attack. Du Ao sent out one defensive spell decree after another. When the divine destruction polearm descended upon him, the spell decrees glowed with a brilliant light and blocked part of the attack. However, Du Ao was still sent crashing to the floor by the impact. The ground trembled with the force of which Du Ao had crashed into it, and Du Ao's arm hung by his side, broken. He spat mouthful after mouthful of blood. With his left arm, Duao reached for the storage ring on his right hand. At the same time, he was retreating quickly, ready to admit defeat and pull out of the situation. However, Yi Futian was planning to end everything right here and right now. Get lost! Duao shouted, and frightening flames surrounded the crowd that was in his way. Someone was incinerated in an instant by the flames. However, enormous ancient vines curled towards Duao from behind, and at the instant Duao took out his spell decrees, the vines passed through the flames and stabbed through his arm, making him drop the spell decrees in his hand. In the next moment, his body was surrounded by the ancient vines, and they crept up the sky with him. Yi Futian, who had been preparing to kill Duao, was taken aback. It had not been him who had attacked Duao, but a powerful figure from the dried-up path. Yi Futian looked behind Duao to see a copper-skinned young man in tattered clothing standing there, staring coldly at Duao. I admit defeat, Duao howled. I'm a disciple of the Sacred Fire sect. The young man paid him no attention. A sharp vine pierced straight into Duao's heart, killing him in midair. Yi Futian's expression changed. Duao had died in the hands of a powerful figure from the dried-up path. Shifting his gaze, Yi Futian saw the person who had been burned by Duao's flames. He seemed to be dressed similarly to the young man. A woman had appeared by the person's side and a dazzling jade-green glow could be seen. The glow enveloped the body as though healing it. Then, powerful figures from the Sacred Fire sect rushed over. Their expressions upon seeing Duao's body were ugly. Duao had held great status within the Sacred Fire sect. He possessed outstanding abilities, but he had still died on the spot. In the sky, a flash of dark fire shot through the eyes of Xie Ji, who was from the Sacred Fire sect. The dark flames went straight for the young man who had killed Duao. Xie Ji was the best of his generation in the Sacred Fire sect, and he was scarily powerful. The power of his will shot through his eyes, infused with the burning of silence flame intent. However, the young man looked up to meet his gaze without hesitation. Xie Ji's body began to burn with frightening flames, and the many-hued flames merged into dragons that charged towards the young man. But ancient vines appeared on the young man's body and curled towards Xie Ji as well. There were questioning looks on many people's faces at the young man using wood elemental spells to fight flames. Furthermore, those were no ordinary flames, but flames that came from Xie Ji. The flames started to burn on the ancient vines in an instant. However, the ancient vines remained intact and even became more frightening as they continued heading for Xie Jia, flames and all. Xie Ji took a step back, and his expression changed. Looking at the young man, he asked, "Which part of the southeastern region are you from?" "The Immortal Village," the young man replied calmly. "The party from the Immortal Village is here as well." The important figures who were on top of the sky stairwell as well as a distance away from the battlefield had noticed the developments here as well. Duao of the Sacred Fire sect was probably the first top-notch powerful figure to have fallen in this chaotic battle. The Immortal Village was situated within the southeastern region of the barren state, where it was just a wasteland. They had no contact with the outside world and had never come to the Divine Road before. But this time, they too had arrived. "Seems like the undying old man is having a pretty satisfactory time," someone commented calmly. The undying old man was one of the higher-ranking individuals within the barren sky ranking. "Look at the girl," someone said, noticing that the woman who had been healing her companion had finished her work and stood up. She raised her head to look at everyone. Dressed in simple white clothing, she was extremely clean and unblemished. While she had seemed very plain before, upon closer inspection, her features were actually stunningly beautiful and she seemed to have a mystical glow about her. It's been rumored that the undying old man has had a successor. It could very well be this girl, someone from the Holy Ji Palace speculated. There was a new bell in the barren state now. The ritual implement that Guy's using seems to be an extraordinary one, someone commented, looking at Yi Futian. It should be the precious divine destruction polearm from the Zhaixing house, someone replied, seeming to know everything about the barren state. That young man is probably the son from Divine Sky City we heard about in the rumors. Since he's Zhuge Mingyue's junior, he should be from the eastern region of the Barren State.
Chapter 544. Xie Ji's eyes gazed at the figure before him. He had heard of the immortal village before. With someone like the undying old man emerging from the place, it was near impossible for anyone not to have heard of the place. Xie Ji's eyes gazed at the figure before him. He had heard of the immortal village before. With someone like the undying old man emerging from the place, it was near impossible for anyone not to have heard of the place. What the undying old man was known for was to keep things immune from decay, be it living beings or dead objects. His old vines were something that not even fire would be able to do anything about. Du Ao wanted to escape from the mess he was in and went about killing passers-by to do it, but he had not expected the one he had burned was someone from the immortal village, and ended up paying the price with his life for it. It was something that would have left many outside deep in thought. The war zone gathered many geniuses from all over the Barren State, which meant that any carelessness could result in dire consequences. Du Ao of the Sacred Fire sect would have probably been oblivious as to who killed him, even at the time of his death. Xie Ji turned his eyes to look at Yi Futian. He conjured a flame on his palm and the space around him turned crazed in an instant. Streaks of black flames danced around Yi Futian, which then turned into a fearsome dark lotus and went on to consume Yi Futian. Yi Futian frowned. "So you think you can push me around instead?" Yi Futian then took hold of the polearm of divine destruction. Meteors gathered around him, yet the fearsome dark lotus coalesced inexhaustible fire spiritual chi, and brought with it horrifying damage potential. A globe of dark flames encased the space and the meteors burned by the flames. It seemed that the flames left terrifying marks on every piece of the meteors before lashing out at Yi Futian. The mighty ones from the Sacred Fire sect surrounded Yi Futian and all casted fire spells. He looked as if he was being locked inside a cage of fire for a moment. The ones from the Sacred Fire sect specialized in manipulating fires, and many of their fire spells had terrifying powers, and, of course, remarkable damage potential. A pure golden palm struck Xie Ji at that very moment, blocking out quite a bit of space above it. Xie Ji flinched a little and then struck at the golden palm with his own palm. His was a palm in dark flames. He was thrown behind somewhat as it clashed with the golden palm. He spared a look at the wild figure that jumped him, Yuan Zhan of the Golden Great Apes. At the same time, Yi Shaoshi lashed out with the imperial vines. Golden lights shimmered as his attack lashed out at the mighty one from the Sacred Fire sect. Yi Wuchen, Yu Sheng and the others made it there soon enough. Thousands of streams of sword aura whooshed about Yi Wuchen. As he pointed his finger before him, the sword auras congealed into a torrent, heading straight for Yi Futian's assailants. Qin Yin, Xianyuan Beishan, Xie Wuji, Zui Qianqiu had also become grade 7 nobles at the moment. They arrived at the scene and began attacking, turning the place into a battlefield where both sides were of equal strength. The ones staying on the battlefield were reduced by the minute, and many turned to look at it. Yi Futian fought his way out of the barricade and went heading for one specific person. He then lifted his staff and struck hard, forcing the mighty one from Sacred Fire sect to quickly back away. However, the golden vines around slithered past and blocked his escape, giving him no choice but to take the strike head-on. Boom! The polearm of divine destruction was brought down hard, and the one struck by it had his body sent flying right away. All his bones and meridians broken, and throwing up blood by the gallon. Yi Shaoshi's imperial vines made their way to several other mighty ones and entangled them before throwing them down.
The following loud thumps spoke of the shock they suffered as they hit the ground. Xie Ji was being held back by Yuan Zhan, and the mighty ones from the Sacred Fire sect were quickly swept away, thrown out of the game. Xie Ji quickly retreated at the scene and looked very troubled. So everyone's out now? There was no one from the Sacred Fire sect left now but him. This. Many looked at the fights taking place there and sported funny looks. The ones from the Sacred Fire sect had been bullying Yi Futian for quite a while, and no one would have expected the tables to turn like this. That overwhelming ape is probably that golden great ape from Mount Taixing then. The Sacred Fire sect suffered quite a humiliating defeat that time. Xia Ji kept retreating while looking gloomy. The odds were stacked entirely against the Sacred Fire sect, and they suffered terrible losses. Yi Futian and the rest did not pursue Xia Ji. The battlefield became more relaxed. The fighting that never ceased in the battlefield threw many out of the game in a very short time. Hua Jieyu kept tabs on Yi Futian's battlefield. She did not participate. There were the mighty ones from the Zhuge family by her side, and there was no need for her to fight. Nice ritual implement he had there, allowing someone only of arcana plane like him to bring quite a lot of power to bear, and it seems to work well with his abilities. Zhuge Xing, who had been watching Yi Futian's battle added, however, the more he relies on the powers of that ritual implement, the more apparent the disadvantages of his low levels will become later on. The battle might allow the use of everything in one's disposal, but the ones after that, not so much. There is no certainty that he would be able to make it to the end and reach the Holy Ji Palace. Even if he was to be noticed by any of the mighty ones from the 1,000 Holy Islands, it'd still be difficult for him to match you. Since Hua Jieyu was brought to the Zhuge family by Zhuge Mingyue kept tabs on all who took care of Hua Jieyu. They even presented a great opportunity for her, and provided her with all sorts of resources to further her training. Hua Jieyu became a totally different person compared to when she first arrived at the Zhuge family. If she were to enter the Holy Ji Palace, her profession as the divine spiritual sorcerer alone would have been enough for her to be noticed by the ones from the palace. While Yi Futian sported extraordinary looks and talents, he would have still paled in comparison to the height of someone like Hua Jieyu, and that was something Zhuge Xing hoped Hua Jieyu would be able to comprehend. Flowery words and cunning statements might have had their uses for some time, but such trickery would have been deemed unpresentable in the world of cultivation. What are you getting at? Hua Jieyu looked at Zhuge Xing. Her eyes looked as bright as the smile she wore with, yet her expression was one that made Zhuge Xing feel distanced, completely different from the expressions she showed to Yi Futian. Zhuge Xing looked at the beautiful young lady by his side. The strands at her forehead swayed about in the air, which made her feel very friendly and approachable. While there was nothing anyone could have made out from his looks at the moment, he was struggling to keep his affection for her contained within. Someone like him would have no trouble getting his hands on beautiful women, yet some did feel different from the others. He had taken notice of her the very first time she came to the Zhuge family. She wore an aura of sorrow about her back then, and there was always a hint of sadness in her eyes, making anyone who saw wanting to embrace her. While he had not been spending much time with Hua Jieyu, as it was Zhuge Mingyue who had been spending time with her most of the time. But every time he saw her, his calm composure would always falter. As time went by, he came to understand that he was longing for her. You might have been lovers, but maybe he is no longer the one for you now. Zhuge Xing stayed silent for a moment before answering the question, and did not bother masking what he intended to say. He believed that Hua Jieyu was able to understand what he meant. The smile on Hua Jieyu's face disappeared completely. She seemed to be reluctant to even spare a patronizing one for Zhuge Xing, despite him being a member of the Zhuge family. No one had any right to judge her relationship with Yi Futian, the boy whom she had been holding hands with near the lake back in Qingzhou. The one who had intruded the Nanda clan with a staff in his hand, and thumbed his nose at the emperor's will. Their relationship was not one she would allow Zhuge Xing to judge. There was nothing she could have done to stop Zhuge Xing from saying what he wanted to say, but at the very least, she could still make her own decisions. Please try not to appear before me ever again. Hints of disgust came from Hua Jieyu's tone before she went to where Yi Futian was. Zhuge Xing's eyes were stunned as he watched the beautiful girl before him take off. While she said please, it did not sound like a polite request at all. Zhuge Xing's expressions looked bad as he saw Hua Jieyu making her way to Yi Futian. Is it really that wrong to even criticize him? Furthermore, he was saying that for her sake. The youths of the Zhuge family all looked funny before one said to Zhuge Xing, we have nurtured and kept her around for more than 2 years, and still no chance of her making into the Zhuge family. What a pity. They spared a look at Yi Futian plainly. Everyone loved beautiful things, but none of them hoped for much in the first place. Despite this, they still hoped that Zhuge Xing was able to get his hands on her and make her a woman of the Zhuge family. From the looks of things, however, the Zhuge family seemed to have nurtured a spiritual divine sorcerer, yet also handed a masterpiece to Yi Futian on a silver platter. Hua Jieyu took to the air, attracting the attention of many. Someone leaped over and got in her way, then burst the spiritual qi around him. All she did, however, was simply cast a cold glance at him. The person instantly felt as if his mind was torn off his body, the spiritual qi that he had control of was torn right there and then as if his body was entirely controlled by her. Hua Jieyu had always been a full attribute spiritual type sorcerer, and possessed powerful spiritual abilities. Her powers grew to fearsome levels after turning into a spiritual divine sorcerer. Vines went on to encase the body of that person, holding him tight, rendering him caught. Lightning followed and with a loud crack, and the bolt fell hard onto the person's body, making him tremble all over before falling below, having seizures all over. Hua Jieyu did not spare any more time on that person and kept going forward instead. Many who wanted to make a move on her held themselves back. The girl seemed to be a little too powerful. At the sky stairwell, many elders from the Holy Ji Palace nodded in approval of her actions. Someone said softly, spiritual divine sorcerers were known as the ultimate sorcerer for their ability to suppress all other types of sorcerers. Even those of higher planes would fall before them. Activating spells with a single thought, and a full attribute one. She is something indeed. Someone nodded at the side. The spiritual divine sorcerer nurtured by the Zhuge family was definitely one to enter the very core island of the Holy Ji Palace, and it was feared that many would fight for her. Hua Jieyu made it to Yi Futian's side under everyone's gaze. Gentleness was seen in Yi Futian's eyes as he noticed her. He said, "I had no idea my girl would be someone this powerful." "That is all thanks to elder sister," Hua Jieyu said gently, with hints of gratitude in her voice. "Second sister is indeed a good one." Yi Futian smiled. "Yeah." Hua Jieyu nodded, her eyes were fixed on Yi Futian. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Yi Futian rubbed his face without realizing it, seeing as how Hua Jieyu kept looking at him smiling. "That's because you're nice to look at." Hua Jieyu smiled brightly and held out her hand. "I haven't seen that face for quite a while after all." Yi Futian grinned and took her hand. "You'll have plenty of time to look at it in the days that follow." "Yeah." Hua Jieyu nodded as she smiled. "Nothing to do with me." Yu Xing walked away sulking. Chapter 545, The Battle Royale raged on in the battlefield. As time went by, fewer and fewer people remained standing, and the vast battlefield no longer seemed cramped anymore. The Battle Royale raged on in the battlefield. As time went by, fewer and fewer people remained standing, and the vast battlefield no longer seemed cramped anymore. Yi Futian and the others stood quietly at a corner. With the Sacred Fire sect defeated, nobody dared move against them. However, it was not just Yi Futian. Many top-class figures remained standing tall in their own corners, nobody daring to move against them unless they were looking for a fight, kicking others out of the game. Eventually, the elder overseeing the battles at the sky stairwell announced, "Cease fighting." Many who were still engaged dispersed as soon as the announcement was heard. The 9-word ring at the 9 major positions dimmed and the screen disappeared. The violent battle royale ended right there and then. It was rather harrowing seeing those left standing on the battlefield for everyone there, as only 3,000 people were left out of all the mighty ones who participated in the first place. The remaining 3,000 were, without doubt, some of the very best every corner of the barren state had to offer. Many moved from the Holy Ji Palace, cleaning up the battlefield and clearing out the injured or the dead. There were mighty ones from the Sacred Fire sect carrying the body of Du Ao away with cold expressions on their faces. Of all the ones from Sacred Fire sect who fought, only Xie Ji alone was left in the battlefield. It was hoped that he could show his mettle in the next battle and avenge Du Ao's death. The battlefield was quickly cleaned up and the remaining 3,000 stood in staggered positions on the field. The elder on the sky stairwell looked at them and continued, "There will be holy tablets descending upon the next battlefield. Those who do not see themselves fit to continue, please leave the battlefield. Only 1,000 out of the 3,000 standing will remain. The 1,000 who remain will be the candidates to enter the Holy Ji Palace. Many among these 1,000 will become disciples of the Holy Ji Palace. As such, please do your best to withstand the pressure brought forth by the holy tablets." All 3,000 who remained right now were figures with serious backings. For instance, great forces like the royal family, the Zhuge family, White Cloud City, and others. None of them came and fought alone. Even Yi Futian had his entourage with him. Many of those who did not have allies before the battle royale found theirs in the battlefield. As such, while the 3,000 who remained were no doubt excellent figures themselves, the selection process was not a complete one. The pressure from the holy tablets coming up next would have selected 1,000 out of the 3,000, making them true candidates for entering the Holy Ji Palace and becoming disciples. It all began from the 9 holy roads. Through multiple selection processes throughout the journey, the best of the best among the Baron State elite were to be presented before the Holy Ji Palace. In the next stage, nobody will be allowed to rely on external instruments or implements of anything. Anyone who is found using such objects to resist the pressure from the holy tablets will be fouled immediately, the elder on the sky stairwell continued. Many mighty ones flashed about and came to the rear of the participants, unleashing formless pressures as if they were to isolate the battlefield. "The holy tablets now, please," the elder on the sky stairwell announced. The vast field turned eerily silent, and the ones standing far away looked in the direction of the Holy Ji Palace. 9 dazzling beams of light appeared and the winds howled in response. One holy tablet after another flew down from the sky stairwell and made their way down like ghosts. The holy tablets were, as per their namesake, huge stone tablets, and each and every one of them was infused with different kinds of powers. Many below began to feel themselves trembling as the tablets made their way down, feeling a formless pressure bearing on them. Said pressures were so powerful that images popped in some of their minds. Boom, boom, boom. 9 tablets descended from the sky and landed before the Holy Ji Palace. Huge stone tablets of 3 zhang tall each appeared before the masses and positioned in an arc. Bam, bam. Rumbling noises were heard as soon as the holy tablets took their positions, and many were heard groaning. A considerable number of people were thrown off, and they kept going back. For cultivators, the strength of one's spiritual will was the key to one's training. This will was a kind of talent on its own, and one that was very, very important. If the strength of one's spiritual will was weak, one could only go so far with their training. It was precisely this reason that the selection process with the holy tablets took place. Furthermore, participants only had their own prowess to rely on, and no one could help anyone. If one failed to pass the trial, they were out of the game immediately. At this very moment, Yi Futian took one step back to steady himself as well, his eyes staring right at the holy tablet before him. The tablet was a fiery red color. It felt as if a figure clad in terrifying flames walked out of the tablet as he fixed his eyes on it. The figure was a great one, seeming like a god of fire itself. It took fearsome steps in his direction, putting more pressure on him with every step. He instinctively wanted to retreat, yet what happened right there alone was part of the test, and he knew that retreating was not an option. Spiritual will attacks were some of the most mysterious powers there were. They did not look real, yet they felt every bit as real as tangible attacks. Yi Futian knew that the holy tablet stood where it was, yet what he saw at the moment was no longer a tablet, but a manifestation of flames taking steps in his directions, trying to burn him into cinders. He felt his own will and body burning, and it was an excruciating experience. The figure seemed far, yet it seemed near at the same time. It took one step after another at him, yet the figure never seemed to reach him. Despite this, the pressure grew as every second passed, making things feel more and more unbearable. Sun flare flashed and blossomed, and a sun was seen right behind Yi Futian. As the will of the flames were unleashed, he closed his eyes to bear the might of the violent burning intent, resisting the pain adamantly. He even began to comprehend the terrifyingly fiery powers within. Jieyu, Yi Futian shouted softly, out of concern for her. The advent of the holy tablets brought nothing but unbearable pain to everyone present. Any lapse in concentration could have brought the thorough collapse of one's will. The test could have been conducted by mighty ones from the Holy Ji Palace by having their imposingly powerful bodies unleash the amount of pressure required. However, as no one was entirely clear of selfish motives, absolute fairness could not have been guaranteed. The holy tablets, however, ensured the same amount of pressures was put on everyone. Anyone who failed to withstand such pressure would be eliminated. Hua Jieyu was withstanding excruciating pain herself. She was sitting right beside Yi Futian, conjuring a formless spiritual power and encasing herself in it to resist the overwhelming pressure. Boom! Someone was struck by lightning and thrown off immediately, landing hard on the ground and throwing up blood. Sages outside the battlefield came to their aid, swooping down from above and hauling the person outside. That person was apparently one who simply lacked the strength yet chose to hold out nonetheless, and their body finally gave under the immense pressure. Some of those who followed the geniuses were eliminated one by one as well. There were also starry school students by his side who gave under the pressure. Qin Yin's body shook lightly, and excruciating pain was easily seen from her face. She threw up blood all of a sudden as her body shuddered. She was thrown behind and was kicked out of the battlefield right there and then. The pressure lifted off her immediately. Qin Yin turned to look in Yi Futian's direction. Xianyuan Beishan, Xia Wuji and Zoe Qianqiu remained where they were, holding on, yet she, the daughter of the sage of Mount Zhoushan, failed. Her eyes looked dejected. Qin Yin knew it was probably due to her esteemed status on Mount Zhoushan and being a daughter doted on by her father. Her birth and status resulted in her lacking in experience with the world, and she had never withstood such pain in her life. All that resulted in her weak will in the face of intense pressure. An esteemed family background did not guarantee excellent talents after all. There were many who were born into high places, yet those who truly shone were those who were able to make out on their own. Seems like I'm less capable than even a bird. Qin Yin looked at the black-winged condor right behind Yi Futian. The demonic beast remained seated quietly, and she had not expected the bird to have such remarkable prowess. More and more people got eliminated, and the field was quickly reduced from 3,000 participants to about 2,000. The rate of reduction slowed somewhat after that, yet there were still many who gave out and were eliminated. On the battlefield, Huang Jiuge's body remained upright, and 3 beams of glittering royal aura were released. He looked impressively regal, and it seemed he was engaged in some battle of wills, bringing his might to bear on his opponent. On the other side, Bai Zai's, from White Cloud City, clothes were billowing and he looked just as impressive. His eyes remained fixed on the holy tablet, and it seemed that he held out well against the pressure. Shuike of the Tingxue house was practically clad in intense murderous intent, flaring about and cutting up any stream of wool that intruded. The 9 swords rang behind Yan Jiu and they danced around him. The sword wills were as sharp as ever. All those top-class geniuses had already comprehended the noble will and sported power spiritual will. It was due to this that they were able to withstand such tremendous pressure, with some even fighting the wills that were intruding their minds. Yi Futian withstood the pressure hard, yet he did not use the power of the emperor's will. The pressure would have been nothing to him if he did so. As the process itself was a trial of sorts, he wanted to experience the strength of the pressure exuded by the holy tablets personally, as it would help a lot with his training. Chapter 546. Yi Futian had already comprehended fire, metal, and earth elemental noble wills. As such, he was experienced in comprehending noble will, which enabled him to learn its way through its workings. Furthermore, he himself had all manners of life spirits corresponding to each element. If he had been able to open up more great ruins in the Holy Road, he would have been able to comprehend greater types of noble wills. Yi Futian had already comprehended fire, metal, and earth elemental noble wills. As such, he was experienced in comprehending noble will, which enabled him to learn its way through its workings. Furthermore, he himself had all manners of life spirits corresponding to each element. If he had been able to open up more great ruins in the Holy Road, he would have been able to comprehend greater types of noble wills. As he had made it out of the Holy Road, the pressure emanated by the holy tablets bearing on his will could have also worked as a kind of power of will, and they each bore different elemental traits. As such, Yi Futian was able to use them to comprehend the power of the noble will. Of course, the starry will of earth element remained the most powerful out of all types of noble wills, followed by fire. It was because both will powers matched well with his training methods, especially the starry will. It was not something he had acquired from the ruins, but something he had learned solely from his own efforts. The flame intent was acquired from the sun scripture coupled with what he comprehended from the great ruins in the flaming prison city. As such, it became comparatively easy for him to comprehend the lightning will at the moment. After acquiring comprehension of the noble wills, Yi Futian's attitude toward sensing the holy tablet pressures changed. It was not just a trial, but also an opportunity. All 9 holy tablets seemed to have different types of spiritual will pressures based on different types of elements. When the lightning will inside him was secured, he protected his willpower with holy will, then turned his focus onto the holy tablet bearing water elemental will. His mind seemed to be assaulted with an absolute will of ice, as if to implore him to stop thinking, turning everything absolutely silent. He even began to feel his body turning stiff, the spiritual chi coursing through his body and the blood flowing within all seemed to be told to stop by the intruding will. Fire was the yang, and water the yin. He recalled the shadow scripture practiced by the headmaster of the Bright Moon School and went on to activate it. The spiritual power of water became crystal clear to him, and it seemed that he was surrounded by mist and frost. A full moon hung above him, and Yi Futian felt his body shrouded in extreme coldness. Everywhere he searched was cold to the extreme, as if the space itself was entirely frozen. There were people who looked in Yi Futian's direction and they looked at him funny. The guy seems to be resisting the intrusion of the power of wills, yet he seems to be training at the same time. Is all that really bearable to someone who is only of arcana plane? Some murmured to themselves. But the assault from the pressure felt from the tablets would probably have been less intense to someone of the arcana plane. Yi Futian's body felt incredibly cold after a while, and even those who sat beside him were covered in frost. His body seemed entirely be encased in a cage of frosty mist, while the cold light of the moon shone on his body. Power originating from the will of the yin gradually emanated from within. It was apparent that the noble will of water element was born within him as well. The number of people staying behind on the battlefield continued dwindling. Those who managed to stay were all extraordinary figures. Yi Futian knew he was running out of time. If he were to use the tablets for training, he needed to be quick with comprehending noble wills. He laid his eyes on yet another tablet soon after. It was one with wind elemental will infused within, and he went on to comprehend its secret. Gales whipped up around him shortly after. Those who took notice of Yi Futian early on seemed to be more certain about their previous speculations about him. So this arcana plane guy is really using the will pressure of the tablets to train. Furthermore, he is training with powers of different elements. That kid is sure an interesting one of the mighty ones from the Holy Ji Palace standing near the sky stairwell quipped as he laid eyes on Yi Futian. Interesting indeed. He hasn't been able to develop any comprehension of noble will powers before, yet noble will seemed to appear within him one after another when he endured the pressure from the tablets. It seems that he has just gained comprehension of them. Someone nodded to the comment. What is his name? One of them asked. Yi Futian from the Eastern Barren Territory. The kid seems to have talents, and it was him who acquired the Yukio song on Sky Mountain. Now he has made it this far to the Holy Ji Palace through the holy roads, the one who had been keeping tabs on him elaborated. Both emperors left a Guqin tune in the remote Sky Mountains in the Eastern Barren Territory. It could be said to be the work of fate for him to get his hands on it, but many would have gotten it now. Someone turned their eyes on the other side of the sky stairwell. There was a figure sitting there quietly with a Guqin in front of him, and it was no other than Bai Luli. Bai Luli had played the Yukio song before. Luli, what do you think about that kid's talents? One of his seniors seemed to have challenged you before, that person asked with a grin. Bai Luli recalled Gu Donglio's challenge, and there was admiration seen in his deep, clear eyes. The teacher from the cottage in Eastern Barren territory was quite a marvelous figure himself, being able to nurture a disciple like the kid here. Given more time, Gu Donglu would have made it to the Barren Sky ranking. Mingyue was also someone from the cottage, and now the junior before us has talent as well. It's a pity that his level is rather low at this point. If he had been able to come here when he had reached grade 7 noble plane, he would have been able to do a lot more great things. Everyone nodded in agreement to Bai Luli's apt comment. It was anyone's guess how Yi Futian would have performed from here on out, and whether it would be good enough to keep their eyes on him. However, if Yi Futian proved excellent enough as a cultivator, there was still the question of taking him in and letting him train at the core islands of the Holy Ji Palace. The reason why Gu Donglu had challenged Bai Luli was because Zhuge Mingyue and the Holy Ji Palace were hoping that Bai Luli would have been a couple with Zhuge Mingyue. If it was done, there might have been a fissure between Bai Luli and Gu Donglu, as well as the ones with Yi Futian. If they were to let Yi Futian train in the Holy Ji Palace, it would have been anyone's guess what Bai Luli would have thought about that. Perhaps Bai Luli himself, with his current status, would not care about things like that. However, it was imperative to consider such matters from the Holy Ji Palace's point of view. Bai Luli's place in the Holy Ji Palace was an extraordinary one. He was like the face of the palace itself. The numbers are close, someone quipped without considering such problems, as it was still rather too early for them. Compared to the rest of the participants, Yi Futian was actually not that much of a standout. A voice came from the sky stairwell. After all, that will be all. The 9 holy tablets took to the air and flew in the Holy Ji Palace's direction after the announcement was heard. Many sighed a breath of relief, feeling the air around them relax. Those geniuses, however, did not show much of a reaction, and they looked calm instead. Yi Futian felt the power of the will of the wind around him, and then quickly put it away. Time was too short indeed, and he was not able to keep training. However, he deemed himself to be doing well at the moment. Only the wood element was left out of the 7 elements to be comprehended. Yi Futian stood up and turned to look at the ones behind him, finding several of them gone. Only Hua Jieyu, Yuan Zhan, Mu Zhiqiu, Yu Sheng, Yi Wuchen, Zui Qianqiu, Shenyuan Beishan, and the Black Wind Condor remained. Qin Yin and Xia Wuji were unable to make it. It was quite a pity, as it was time for the Holy Ji Palace to select disciples to be taken in. Only 1,000 were left on the humongous battlefield, and the small number of people left had the place feeling rather empty. Everyone who remained on the battlefield, however, were true elites. Countless watched the ones who remained on the battlefield from the outside. Many were mighty ones from all over the barren state, and some were from the 1,000 holy islands. The true objective of the trials would take place soon, as it was time for the Holy Ji Palace to pick their disciples. Those candidates had proven themselves by getting past the last round, meaning that they had earned the chance to be disciples of a training place that was thought to be the most powerful in all of the barren state. The elder spoke on the sky stairwell, his eyes on everyone below. Everyone, disperse and head to the edge of the battlefield. Everyone went rearward towards the edge of the platform. Yi Futian and his group took a corner for themselves. The air was tense. And now, it will be time for the Holy Ji Palace to select its disciples. The selection will be done through battle, using only one's own powers, no implements or instruments of any kind allowed. Who among you is willing to be the first to accept the challenge? The elder said at the stairwell. The remaining 1,000 all looked serious. The last stage was also the most important one, as it would determine if they were able to make it as a disciple of the Holy Ji Palace, determined by the battles that were about to take place. Only actual battles proved to be the one true standard for measuring one's talents. I will. A figure walked out among the huge group of people. Countless eyes went in that figure's direction. That figure was someone walking out from beside Zhuge Xing. A member of the Zhuge family, Zhuge Ping. At the side of the Holy Ji Palace sky stairwell, Zhuge Mingyue and Zhuge Kanyang stood, feeling startled. They then saw Zhuge Ping cast his glance at a single spot, where Yi Futian and Hua Jieyu stood. I will challenge him for my first battle. Zhuge Ping pointed at Yi Futian and sounded rather lazy as he said so. Yi Futian's performance prior had been rather eye-catching as he took out Du Ao alone. However, that was mostly attributed to the immense powers of the superpowered ritual implement. Chapter 547, Yi Futian walked up to the middle of the large battlefield and looked at Zhuge Ping standing opposite of him. Zhuge Ping was wearing a rather smug expression on his face. Being one of the elites from the Zhuge family, Zhuge Ping had absolute confidence in his abilities, especially when facing against someone of the Arcana plane. He was not doing this to be chosen by the Holy Ji Palace, as defeating someone on a lower plane would not show off his true capabilities, but he chose to fight Yi Futian first nonetheless. Yi Futian walked up to the middle of the large battlefield and looked at Zhuge Ping standing opposite of him. Zhuge Ping was wearing a rather smug expression on his face. Being one of the elites from the Zhuge family, Zhuge Ping had absolute confidence in his abilities, especially when facing against someone of the Arcana plane. He was not doing this to be chosen by the Holy Ji Palace, as defeating someone on a lower plane would not show off his true capabilities, but he chose to fight Yi Futian first nonetheless. The very reason he was doing this was because of Hua Jieyu. She was, after all, a spiritual divine sorcerer nurtured by the Zhuge family, and also one with looks so beautiful that men would kill for her. Letting someone like Yi Futian get his hands on a treasure was a notion that irked him incessantly. He was not the only one among the younger generations of the Zhuge family to think so. As such, when Zhuge Xing asked for him to fight, he did so without any hesitation or reservation. He was simply doing this to show Hua Jieyu that Yi Futian was not the man for her. Yi Futian was, of course, very clear why Zhuge Ping wanted to fight him. He could not have thought of any reason other than Hua Jieyu. Hua Jieyu's smile has made many in the Zhuge family fall for her, I guess, he thought. Yi Futian smiled and cupped his hands. Yi Futian, grade 9 of Arcana plane, halfway into the noble plane. I look forward to learning from you. Arcana is arcana and noble is noble. I have never heard of such a thing as half a noble or whatever, Zhuge Ping said plainly. Zhuge Ping from the Zhuge family, grade 9 noble, and I look forward to teaching you real good. Lightning flashed the moment Zhuge Ping finished, and Yi Futian found himself in a world filled with lightning in his mind. Angry bolts flashed about in the battlefield, bringing thunderous might to bear down on Yi Futian. Zhuge Ping's silhouette was nowhere to be found, and everyone was able to see were mirages of lightning bolts. Lightning phantasm movements. All cast their eyes on Zhuge Ping as he zipped about like a bolt of lightning. Yi Futian saw a finger infused with sparks coming right for him at his brow. The finger felt like a terrifying flash cutting through the air. The heavy pressure of Zhuge Ping's will flashed inside his mind. The finger attack seemed more ferocious in both speed and power than that of a sword. Thrusting thunder finger. Many continued to follow Zhuge Ping's movements with their eyes. The Zhuge family was one of the two forces that were most known for their specialty in manipulating the power of lightning. The other being the lightning court in Zhongzhou City. Zhuge Ping blazed past with incredible speed as if he had truly turned into lightning. Despite being rather cocky, Zhuge Ping has the actual strength to back it, the members of the Holy Ji Palace quipped to Zhuge Kanyang. Lightning flared on Yi Futian's body at the moment as well. He cranked up his thundering illusion steps and backed away quickly, appearing in the distance in the blink of an eye. Zhuge Ping's thrusting thunder finger shot out, and a terrifying flash stabbed through the air where he stood. If Yi Futian remained where he was, the consequences would have been dire. Zhuge Ping frowned. He had intended to overwhelm Yi Futian using the most direct of methods, yet he missed all the same, which spoke volumes of Yi Futian's speed. Another flash of lightning was seen and Zhuge Ping was nowhere to be found again. He stretched his hand to grab Yi Futian, and streaks of lightning flashes seemed to coil around Yi Futian's body like tentacles. Light of earth element glimmered before Yi Futian, conjuring a large meteor which was quickly crushed by the lightning. Yi Futian himself, however, continued moving backward. What kind of fight is that? If that's all he is capable of, it looks rather ugly. Many looked at Yi Futian. While there was no doubt that he was fast, he had avoided facing Zhuge Ping thus far. There was no doubt that his lower plane put him at a disadvantage, but fighting like this here made him look rather bad. Is this really that kind of person Hua Jieyu has fallen for? Zhuge Xing turned to look at Yi Futian and felt rather disappointed. He had expected Yi Futian to have performed better than what he had seen thus far. Lightning flashed wildly on the battlefield, yet Yi Futian avoided all confrontation, doing nothing but evading and defending against attacks. Zhuge Ping's speed seemed inferior to Yi Futian's, which angered him and made him unleash his life spirit. Illusions of lightning bolts appeared, a product of the Zhuge family's most renowned art, the Thundering Thousand Illusions. Illusions of Zhuge Ping seemed to fill the battlefield in an instant, and he himself seemed to be bathed in the flashes of lightning as he went for Yi Futian. The illusions appeared around Yi Futian, locking him out. They said at the same time, "We'll see where you can run to now." The place seemed to be drowned in flashes of lightning, and bolts rained down on Yi Futian. The many illusions of Zhuge Ping went for the fatal blow at the very next moment. Every illusion seemed to bear actual power as the thrusting thunder finger jutted out at him. Watching how Yi Futian was simply standing unmoved, many thought the battle was going to end soon. However, a mist appeared on the battlefield. Extremely cold air shrouded the area and Zhuge Ping was only able to feel the flow of his blood slow. Everything in the world seemed to move in slow motion, seemingly grinding to a halt. Worse still, intense will of gravity seemed to have befallen him, making his movements even more sluggish. Yi Futian stood quietly where he was as he lifted his hand. Violet lightning coiled around his arm and he cast his eyes in one direction. This alerted Zhuge Ping and made him nervous, feeling a looming threat about him. How was Yi Futian able to determine where my true body was? Bam! Yi Futian stomped on the ground and a flash of lightning burst from beneath his feet. Many saw a flash of lightning that moved even faster than the one before. Zhuge Ping wanted to respond, yet his mind and body seemed to have become so sluggish that he was able to do nothing as Yi Futian zipped past him. A light smile was seen on Zhuge Mingyue's face instead. So this little brother was still that same little brother that we knew. Cute indeed. I'm sure this is one lesson that Zhuge Ping will never forget. Well, he did win, but he seems to lack something. There was no air of a top-class mighty one about him, Zhuge Kanyang quipped plainly. Well, some people are meant to be different. Don't go measuring everything with your standards. That air you speak of, you will see it soon enough, Zhuge Mingyue replied in an equally plain manner. Elsewhere, in another corner, Yi Futian was doing something else. Was that intentional? Hua Jieyu came up to him and chuckled. She knew naturally that Yi Futian's abilities were beyond what was seen earlier. He had not gone all out with his battle with Zhuge Ping. How's that possible? I'm an honest person. Yi Futian smiled, yet he looked at Zhuge Ping with rather sarcastic eyes nonetheless. He had heard Mu Zhiqiu talk about the rules in the last selection process before. Those who lost their battle, if they performed exceptionally enough, or if their opponents were simply too powerful and they were finished off right away, the Holy Ji Palace would give them another chance. There were those like Huang Jioge and Bai Zhe after all. No one fighting them would have much of a chance showing what they were truly capable of fighting them. His battle with Zhuge Ping was different, however. He had been at a disadvantage all along. He had only able to turn the tables with the last lightning attack. It was Zhuge Ping who had underestimated his opponent, and he was of a much higher plane. It was only natural that he was disqualified right away. The ones from the Zhuge family wanted to humiliate him in ways that were apparent to Hua Jieyu. As such, in Yi Futian's perspective, it was only natural that he returned the favor. Yeah, I believe you. Hua Jieyu's beautiful eyes looked at Yi Futian, and she knew everything that was going on in his head. Chapter 548, The rules of selection of the Holy Ji Palace were very simple. Anyone who walked out would need to display his power and talents in actual combat. Regardless of whether he won or not, he would have a chance to be selected, as long as his performance was sufficiently outstanding. The rules of selection of the Holy Ji Palace were very simple. Anyone who walked out would need to display his power and talents in actual combat. Regardless of whether he won or not, he would have a chance to be selected, as long as his performance was sufficiently outstanding. Everyone would try their best to display their talents and win the fight because they might be eliminated if they lost and were not selected by any sage of the Holy Ji Palace. Those who won could continue battling even if they were not selected yet. Zhuge Ping was the first to fight. Unfortunately, he underestimated his opponent and lost. Moreover, the Holy Ji Palace did not give him a second chance. This was indeed a very miserable ending for him. After all, he was a junior genius in the Zhuge family and it was not easy for him to even reach this stage. There were only 3 people from the Zhuge family in total. Who will participate in the second battle? The cultivator from the Holy Ji Palace continued. The atmosphere in the battlefield became tenser. With the lesson learned from Zhuge Ping's failure, nobody would dare to underestimate their opponents anymore. At the moment, everyone was just one step away from entering the Holy Ji Palace. Me, someone said in a low tone. Then, everyone saw a person walk out. Realizing his identity, many people seemed to be surprised. Why did he actually walk out so soon? It was Xie Ji from the Sacred Fire sect. Xie Ji was the most outstanding disciple from his clan in this generation, and his position was even higher than Duao. Of course, he was also more powerful and he was currently at the peak of grade 7 of the noble plane. If he really fought, who would be able to deal with him except for a few top geniuses? Nevertheless, there were many people left on the battlefield. Nobody thought that Xie Ji would choose them as the opponent. Xie Ji turned his head and looked in a certain direction. Immediately, some surprise flashed across the faces of many. Then, Xie Ji pointed at Yi Futian and said, "You." Heir. Many people were bewildered. Xie Ji, who was a genius from the Sacred Fire sect and also a grade 7 noble, wanted to challenge someone in the Arcana plane. It was almost like bullying. Clearly, Xie Ji chose so purely to get revenge on Duao, and not to display his talents so that he could be chosen by the Holy Ji Palace. Ha! Can he even do this? Yi Shaoshi squinted. Lifting his head, he looked at the Holy Ji Palace and asked, "Can I fight for him instead?" "No," the cultivator from the Holy Ji Palace replied. "The rules of the elimination tournament are as such. Anyone can choose his opponent freely. Of course, the person being challenged can also admit defeat. After all, he is not the one whose performance will be assessed in this round." Yi Futian was the one being challenged, so it would not matter even if he lost. Later, he would have the chance to actively challenge other people to display his talents. Otherwise, it would be very unfair to those with lower levels, because they might be challenged by a much more powerful cultivator. Nevertheless, despite this being the case, Xie Ji seemed to be bullying Yi Futian with his status and level. Xie Ji would normally feel disdain to do so. However, Duao was killed, so his actions could be understood. "Don't go." Hua Jieyu looked at Yi Futian. Yi Shaoshi and the rest also shook their heads at Yi Futian. "It wouldn't matter for me to just feel how strong he is," Yi Futian said, smiling. Then, he walked to the center of the arena. Xie Ji was one of the most powerful people present on the battlefield. Yi Futian really wanted to try how strong he was. Previously, Yi Futian had used the polearm of divine destruction in the battles. At the moment, he did not have any ritual implement or emperor will. Xie Ji, who was a grade 7 noble, was 3 levels above him. Furthermore, even among the grade 7 nobles, Xie Ji was considered to have a superior combat power. The difference was indeed very large. However, since Yi Futian had arrived here, he would need to face opponents like Xie Ji anyway. It would be good for him to have some experience in advance. Sacred Fire Sect Xie Ji, grade 7 noble. Xia Ji stared at Yi Futian with a gloomy look. Let's start. In the last battle, Yi Futian had already mentioned his name and level, so he did not repeat it. Once he finished speaking, a trace of dark flame appeared in the pupils of Xia Ji. A terrifying noble will charge directly into Yi Futian's mind. At once, Yi Futian felt a frightening dark fire lotus appear in his spiritual will. The lotus grew and expanded continuously and released much pressure, trying to engulf and incinerate his will. It was still noble will. However, Xia Ji's level was much higher than his, so the will was obviously much strong. In Yi Futian's spiritual will, a mysterious radiance was born, much like the radiance from the stars. The pure radiance enveloped his spiritual will, protecting it from the erosion. Buzz! The appalling dark fire lotus started burning directly in Yi Futian's mind. The attack was indeed dominating, trying to incinerate his spiritual will. It was already way more powerful than mere pressure from noble will. Xia Ji was a spirit elemental mandate sorcerer. Fire was only one of his abilities. Only a spirit elemental sorcerer could do more than just pressuring his opponent with his noble will, he could launch an actual attack directly with spiritual energy. The pure starry radiance enveloped Yi Futian's spiritual will and allowed the Dark Lotus to attack it freely, but its defense could not be broken. The radiance was the core of the Saint Will Yi Futian had inherited from the martial arts battlefield. The three beams of divine light came into being precisely from the core and could be controlled by it. That was why the chiefs of Blazing Sun School and Bright Moon School would fall into Yi Futian's trap, and he even managed to secretly learn their techniques. Xia Ji launched an attack with his spiritual will directly. He was trying to kill Yi Futian. Realizing that the spiritual attack actually did not manage to destroy Yi Futian, Xia Ji started to control the fire elemental spiritual qi around him. Immediately, many traces of dark flames appeared around Yi Futian, turning into many dark lotuses. Every one lotus contained an enormous amount of destructive powers. Whenever a spirit elemental mandate sorcerer cast a spell, the casting speed and power of the spell would be higher. The dark lotuses circled rapidly around Yi Futian's body, and a scorching wave of dark flames engulfed the region Yi Futian was in. Ice walls suddenly appeared and a layer of frost emerged around Yi Futian. However, under the scorching heat, the ice was evaporated directly, producing a sizzling sound. Xia Ji's level was way higher than him. Why is he still fighting? Outside the arena, Li Qingyi, Qin Yin, and Lu Lanshui were watching. Although they did not manage to stay on the battlefield, they were still paying close attention to Yi Futian's battle. At the moment, they were all somewhat anxious. Suddenly, a powerful wave of meteorite storm appeared around Yi Futian. They turned into the constitution of stars, resisting the burning flames. The wildly rotating dark lotuses converged to form a huge dark lotus, enveloping Yi Futian's body. The meteorite storm was engulfed directly, and many meteorites were burnt into nothingness. Burn! Xia Ji shouted coldly. The dark fire lotus engulfed everything in its path. At once, Yi Futian shot towards the sky like a bolt of lightning. The dark lotus closed, trying to incinerate Yi Futian inside it. A golden bolt of lightning flashed across the sky and Yi Futian managed to charge out. At the moment, he was wearing a golden piece of armor and showered in starry radiance. Around him, the radiance of the dark flames still seemed to be flowing. A terrifying air current exploded and only then did the flames slowly dissipate. He's actually not incinerated. Many people looked at Yi Futian, whose defense was really amazing. Xia Ji lifted his head and looked at Yi Futian. He extended his palm again, but Yi Futian smiled and said, "Nice attack. I admit defeat." Then, he backed off and exited from the stage, returning to his original position. Xia Ji glanced coldly at Yi Futian. Although the fight was short, he could already feel that Yi Futian was not weak. Both his spiritual energy and physical defense were way beyond that of an ordinary arcana plane cultivator. Even a grade 8 noble would have been burnt to death under such an attack. Zhuge Xing looked at the scene emotionlessly. He did not walk up to the stage just now precisely because he knew that Yi Futian could admit defeat directly. It was pointless for him to challenge Yi Futian. Yan Zhou, Bing Yi, Chu Shang, and many people from Nantian House had also been paying attention to this battle. Without the ritual implement, he indeed can't make it far. Bing Yi looked at Yi Futian. It seemed like Yi Futian's ritual implement was extremely powerful. Xia Ji, are you willing to join an island of the 1,000 holy islands to cultivate? Someone on the sky stairwell asked. Xia Ji looked in that direction and replied, no. Then you can go down first, the person said emotionlessly. Even though Xia Ji had only fought with Yi Futian, there were still people from the 1,000 holy islands who were willing to accept Xia Ji. He rejected the offer, but it was also what they had expected. The core island of the Holy Ji Palace would only choose its disciples among the last 100 people left. The top geniuses would certainly not choose to join any of the 1,000 holy islands in advance. They would be part of the last 100 cultivators. Next, the cultivator from the Holy Ji Palace said. After that, many cultivators walked out one after another and challenged various people. Some people were chosen and entered the Holy Ji Palace, while others performed poorly and were eliminated. Of course, a minority rejected the offers from the 1,000 holy islands and wanted to stay in the arena. Their goal was obvious. As the battle continued, a few extremely outstanding geniuses also participated. For example, when Huang Jioga from Sovereign Family walked out, he randomly chose a grade 7 noble. He punched out and his sovereign spiritual chi turned into a pure-blooded dragon. The overpowering attack crushed his opponent directly. When Su Ke from Tingshui House fought, a murderous aura filled the arena. He struck out his hand and a blood mark appeared on his opponent's neck. He showed mercy because he was in an arena under the Holy Ji Palace. Otherwise, his opponent would have been killed by a single attack. Zhuge Xing also took part in a battle. He only raised his hand and pointed in the air. A bolt of lightning penetrated across the sky and struck onto his opponent, who immediately collapsed. When Bai Zhe from White Cloud City attacked, many people could not even see what he had done before his opponent fell onto the ground. Qi Meng from Demon God Clan only stood there and his violent-looking body was unshakable. He managed to lift his opponent up easily as if he was actually a domineering demon god. Many other top geniuses from various places took part in the battle one after another and displayed their shocking combat powers. The people who were left behind were all elites, but the top geniuses seemed to be in another level. They were able to crush their opponents. Without any exception, these people rejected the offers from the 1,000 holy islands. Their stage would only be the last part of the elimination tournament. Many people were looking forward to that, wondering how brilliant the battles would be when these people fought against each other. The night below the Holy Ji Palace looked just like the day. A cultivator had cast a spell to create an illusion so that it would always be daytime in the arena. Nobody felt any fatigue, including the spectators. Eventually, a few hundred cultivators had walked out, many of which had real talents. The important figures of the Holy Ji Palace looked at every battle with much interest. Ultimately, this arena belongs to those people. It seems like I wouldn't be able to see the scene that you have described. Zhuge Kanyang glanced at Yi Futian and his friends who were in silence. There were too many outstanding people. In fact, he also believed in Zhuge Mingyue's insight. If Yi Futian was a grade 7 noble, he would be able to stand at the center of the battle stage. However, as an Arcana Plane cultivator, he was really too weak. Against the more powerful people, he might not even be able to fight. It was not just Zhuge Kanyang. In fact, many people felt this way. As the battles continued, people began to pay less and less attention to Yi Futian. This arena did not belong to him. Suddenly, another cultivator walked out, attracting the eyes of many. Someone in the crowd said, "He's Yan Nan from Sword Saint Villa. He is very talented in sword skills and not much weaker than Yan Zhou. His position in Sword Saint Villa is extraordinary because he's very strong." Many people looked at Yan Nan. At the moment, everyone left behind in the arena could be considered as a genius. Yan Nan walked to the center of the arena and looked in Yi Futian's direction. Previously, when Yi Futian took over their relic by force, he was also present, so he still remembered this clearly. However, he did not challenge Yi Futian again. Yi Futian was only in the Arcana plane and he might admit defeat if he was challenged. How boring that would be. You, come out. Yan Nan stared at Yi Wuchen, who was also a swordsman. Moreover, Yi Wuchen had inherited the relic from Flying Sword City. Chapter 549, Be careful, Yi Futian reminded softly. The cultivators from Sword Saint Villa looked really strong. All the people who were still there were certainly very powerful. Be careful, Yi Futian reminded softly. The cultivators from Sword Saint Villa looked really strong. All the people who were still there were certainly very powerful. Yi Wuchen nodded gently, after which he stepped forward and walked to the center of the arena. Many people stared at his single arm, as well as the sword he was carrying on his back. Was he a one-armed swordsman? Nobody knew what outstanding characteristics he had that had allowed him to stay until this moment. Yan Nan, Grade 8 Noble from Sword Saint Villa. Yi Wuchen, Grade 9 Noble. Handicapped first. Yan Nan gestured at Yi Wuchen, signaling him to attack first, but the word handicapped was particularly grating. The people around Yan Nan all stared at him in surprise. With his status, he should not be humiliating another cultivator in such a way, unless there was some resentment between the two of them. The people from Dawn Road knew the exact reason. Clearly, Yan Nan, who was from Sword Saint Villa, was extremely unhappy that Yi Wuchen and Yi Futian had obtained the relic from Flying Sword City. It should be a place for him to cultivate instead. In his opinion, Yi Wuchen was an unknown one-armed person. What did Yi Wuchen have that had allowed him to inherit the relic that was supposed to belong to Sword Saint Villa? In reality, Yan Nan was indeed thinking this. A handicapped cultivator had inherited the relic that originally belonged to him and his clanmates. How humiliating! The faces of Yi Futian and Yu Xing darkened at once and a cold beam of light flashed across their eyes. A faint, freezing aura was even emitted from Yi Futian's body. On the other hand, Yu Xing clenched his fists tightly, producing a crackling sound. Handicapped? They did not forget how Yi Wuchen's other arm was cut off. Yi Wuchen's pupils contracted and he glanced at Yan Nan, but he did not seem to have an intense reaction. In fact, he was even calmer than Yi Futian and Yu Xing. He had already accepted the fact that he was one-armed a long time ago. Cultivators were supposed to cultivate their mentality, and his arm was already not too important to him. Yi Wuchen still vividly remembered his master's words. It was more important for him as a swordsman to have a clear focus. Sword will started to flow around Yi Wuchen and his entire body seemed to have turned into a sword itself. A dazzling radiance erupted and thousands of swords circled around him, awaiting their orders. Together, they produced a loud clanking. Yi Wuchen pointed his finger forward. Right away, the thousands of swords charged towards Yan Nan like rain. Yan Nan stared at Yi Wuchen's action coldly. Was Yi Wuchen trying to show off his sword skills before him? Behind Yan Nan, a beam of light bloomed and a huge sword seemed to have appeared. Immediately, a vast amount of sword will swept over and converged together. The huge sword solidified gradually and a terrifying storm made from sword chi emerged around it. The huge sword vibrated, after which it struck forward as if it had been drawn out of its sheath. 9 swords of the Celestials, edgeless great sword. Instantly, the huge sword struck out, even the incoming sword chi from Yi Wuchen seemed to have stopped flowing. Then, the sword will all bypassed the huge sword. Both of them were swordsmen. However, Yan Nan was a grade 8 noble, while Yi Wuchen was only grade 9. With a higher level, Yan Nan's sword will was purer and more powerful, and certainly much stronger than an ordinary swordsman. However, the sword chi coming from Yi Wuchen did not stop. Instead, the sword chi which filled the sky only charged over wildly. He had obtained the inheritance of a sage from the Holy Ji Palace in Flying Sword City, so he was clearly stronger. Suddenly, the sword will in the sky turned into many swords in an orderly manner. Then, they unified and actually charged towards the same place, colliding with the light screen around the incoming huge sword. An ear-piercing noise erupted and everyone stared attentively at the battlefield. Sword chi blotted out the sky, producing a spectacular sight. Gradually, many cracks appeared on the light screen around the huge sword, after which it cracked open. An endless amount of sword will pierce towards the huge sword. In the end, even the edgeless great sword had countless cracks on it and it eventually broke into pieces, dissipating into nothingness. Yan Nan glanced coldly at Yi Wuchen. He is not too weak, he thought. Then, Yan Nan flashed forward and passed through the endless sword will like a sharp sword himself. He appeared in the sky, and another sword appeared behind him. The sword penetrated across the air like a bolt of lightning, crushing the sword chi in its path. With a speed that was too fast to be seen by the naked eye, the sword charged towards Yi Wuchen's forehead directly. Many people held their breaths. The sword was so fast that they could hardly see anything. It was more like a beam of light. It was the sword of light in the 9 swords of the Celestials. At the moment, a brilliant wave of sword will emerge from in between Yi Wuchen's eyebrows, after which the powerful sword will turn into a sharp sword, shooting forward. The 2 lightning-like beams of light crashed into each other. Yi Wuchen backed off, but suddenly, he felt an intense sense of danger. Yi Wuchen's body suddenly moved to the right, leaving an afterimage behind. Following a soft thud, Yi Wuchen's left sleeve was cut into 2 directly. A blade of light flashed across and was hardly visible to the eyes. So close! Everyone stared at the arena. The 9 swords of the Celestials from Sword Saint Villa. This is the swords of light and darkness. The swords of light are exposed, while the swords of darkness are hidden. I didn't expect Yan Nan to be skilled in this technique. It is quite rare. Looking at the scene, an important figure from the Holy Ji Palace praised. You should be grateful that you're handicapped, Yan Nan said. Yi Wuchen looked at the sleeve that had been cut into 2, and it was empty inside. Wuchen. Yi Futian was somewhat anxious. He knew Yi Wuchen very well. Due to his personality, Yi Wuchen would not admit defeat easily when it came to swordsmanship. He would rather be severely injured than admit defeat. Moreover, Yan Nan was a dangerous person. At the moment, Yi Wuchen looked at Yan Nan, who extended his finger. Realizing that there was some sword will flowing around the tip of Yan Nan's finger, Yi Wuchen closed his eyes. The swords of light could be seen, but the swords of darkness were hard to block. With his understanding of swordsmanship, Yi Wuchen should not have missed that out, but he did not manage to detect the sword of darkness at all. This meant that the sword of darkness was really powerful. Since his eyes were useless here, Yi Wuchen had decided to close them. It seems like you don't even want your eyes, Yan Nan sneered. However, suddenly, he saw Yi Wuchen, who was showered in endless sword chi, move, charging towards him like a sharp sword. Yan Nan pointed his finger at the sky. At once, an infinite amount of sword chi converged into a huge sword which fell down from the sky. It struck towards Yi Wuchen, attempting to crush everything in its path. The sword chi around Yi Wuchen danced wildly and swept towards the sky. However, Yan Nan also stepped forward, walking towards Yi Wuchen. A battle between 2 swordsmen was always the most dangerous. In just one strike, one of them could be killed. In addition, melee combat between 2 swordsmen would be several times more dangerous. However, Yi Wuchen was fearless, so Yan Nan would not be scared as well. The sword chi above Yi Wuchen collided wildly with the huge sword. On the other hand, many swords appeared in front of Yan Nan. As he pointed his finger forward, the swords of light were activated. Every single sword turned into a beam of light, charging towards Yi Wuchen. Yi Wuchen similarly pointed his finger forward. Right away, several sword veils appeared before him and converged into one. Then, it turned into 9 beams of sword chi, striking towards the swords of light. They collided in midair. However, Yi Wuchen felt an intense sense of danger again, just like a while ago. At the moment, Yi Wuchen was clearly focused and time seemed to have slowed down for him. He could feel intense fluctuations coming from the swords of darkness in several places before him. This time, it was not just one sword. Instead, there were 3 beams of sword chi coming from 3 different directions, blocking all possible paths to dodge. Suddenly, a brilliant radiance erupted from Yi Wuchen. A bright blade of light appeared above his sword body as he dashed forward. At the moment, his body had combined with his sword had combined with his will, and his will had combined with his heart. Buzz! The 3 terrifying swords of darkness brushed past Yi Wuchen's body, after which they actually collided with each other, sending out a horrifying force. On the other hand, Yi Wuchen had managed to close the distance between him and Yan Nan. He dodged it. The powerful cultivators all looked at Yi Wuchen in surprise. With their levels, they could clearly see what had happened in the arena. Yan Nan frowned, but he did not seem to be too bothered. There was still a frightening power on his fingertip. However, out of a sudden, Yi Wuchen who was before him opened his eyes as bright as the blade of a sword. In the next instant, Yan Nan saw an appalling sharp sword strike towards his throat. He sneered, after which his palm turned into a sword and swept out. A sharp noise was produced, but his attack somehow missed. Then, an intense feeling of danger befell Yan Nan and his heart pounded fiercely. This was an illusory sword technique. Stepping in the air, Yan Nan retreated backward, and a strong wave of sword will appeared before him, protecting him. Then, he felt a sharp sword pierce towards him. If he was slightly slower, his throat would have been slit open. The sword that he had seen was actually illusory. The real fatal blow came slower than what he had seen. Suddenly, Yan Nan saw another 2 blades of light charging towards him. Just as he was thinking for a strategy, he felt another sense of danger. He sped up and his body seemed to have turned into a sword. However, instead of moving forward, he was trying to back away. Yan Nan formed a sword seal with his hands and a powerful sword veil appeared before him. Yi Wuchen's attack finally arrived, and the second strike was faster than what Yan Nan had seen. It was an illusory sword technique. Whatever Yan Nan was seeing was all illusory. Indeed, Heavenly Eye's sword technique could be considered as an illusory sword technique. Moreover, Yi Wuchen had merged his Heavenly Eye's sword technique with his understanding of swordsmanship, fusing it with the aggressive technique that he had obtained from the relic. At the moment, thousands of waves of sword chi charged out. This was the Sword of Chaos. Yan Nan's face turned pale, he did not know which swords were real and which were illusory. Yan Nan put his hands together and thousands of swords gathered around him. He no longer attempted to attack and could only defend, guarding his body with sword chi. Immediately, his body was enveloped in a sword veil. Suddenly, Yi Wuchen appeared before him. The one-armed swordsman strolled in the air and an endless amount of sword chi in the sky converged towards him, growing in strength as time passed. Everyone could only see countless swords floating around Yi Wuchen, producing a clanking sound. In the sky, more and more swords gathered around him. Strike! Yi Wuchen pointed his finger forward. At once, an infinite amount of sword chi shot towards a certain place. Everyone saw a sword rain charging towards the same spot. Almost immediately, cracks appeared on Yan Nan's defense. Yan Nan, admit defeat. Yan Jiao, who was at the edge of the arena, shouted. Swordsmen were known for their aggressiveness. They could crush all defenses, but their own defense was comparatively much weaker. Previously, Yan Nan had gained an advantage in his attacks and was able to suppress Yi Wuchen. However, the situation of the battle flipped around out of a suddenly. Yi Wuchen was attacking Yan Nan with countless swords at the moment and Yan Nan was absolutely on the losing end. If this continued, Yan Nan would not only lose but he would also be killed. Yan Nan's face turned very gloomy as he stared at Yi Wuchen in the sky. The sword veil around him was already on the verge of being crushed. Just then, Yi Wuchen raised his hand and the thousands of swords around him clanked. I admit defeat. Yan Nan roared, not resigned to his fate. Yi Wuchen's finger stopped in the air, after which the sword chi dissipated. Countless people gazed at Yi Wuchen. This one-armed swordsman who had been keeping a low profile was humiliated by Yan Nan, being addressed as a handicapped. However, he actually defeated Yan Nan, a Sword Saint Villa disciple. He is actually also so strong, Li Qingyi, Qinin, and the other people from Dawn Road thought. It seemed like nobody with Yi Futian was weak, although their levels were somewhat low. Yan Nan's face darkened as he stood blankly at his spot. He had actually lost. I actually lost to a handicapped. Yan Nan gave a self-mocking smile. The word handicapped was still particularly grating. Raising his head, he looked at Yi Wuchen. Is that what you learned from the relic? Yi Wuchen glanced coldly at Yan Nan. Ignoring him, Yi Wuchen turned around and left. Since he could not kill Yan Nan, it was pointless to say anything else. Wait, an elder from the Holy Ji Palace suddenly said. Yi Wuchen, do you want to join my island? Yi Wuchen was the one being challenged, but his power was approved by the Holy Ji Palace in this battle. Someone wanted to accept him as a disciple. Thank you, but I would like to stay in the arena. Yi Wuchen bowed gently, after which he continued his way back. He had rejected the offer. Moreover, because he was the one who was challenged and had obtained the approval of the Holy Ji Palace, he would not need to fight anytime soon. The elder did not say anything. He looked at Yan Nan and asked, "How about you?" Although Yan Nan had lost, his power was similarly approved. Yan Nan glanced emotionlessly at the back of Yi Wuchen. How could he accept something that Yi Wuchen had rejected? No. Yan Nan turned around and left. Because he had obtained someone's approval, he could still stay in the arena despite having lost. He was promoted to the next round. Both of them had actually rejected the offer. Clearly, they had greater ambitions. To Yan Nan, if he was to join the 1,000 Holy Islands, he might as well stay in Sword Saint Villa. In the crowd, Chen Yuan said to Mu Chuan, "Did you see that? Even the person beside him can enter the Holy Ji Palace." Moreover, he rejected the offer from the 1,000 Holy Islands. I really don't know why you're always so proud before me. Zhaixing House had been acting superior just because Mu Jifan was a disciple of the Holy Ji Palace. Now, Chen Yuan was almost elated. Behind him, Mu Jifan's face darkened. Indeed, even Yi Wuchen could enter the Holy Ji Palace. The reason that he had been so complacent seemed insignificant at the moment. The arena was somewhat silent. The battle between the two evenly matched swordsmen just now was very remarkable. Yi Wuchen returned to the side of the arena. Yi Futian looked at his sleeve which had been cut off and asked softly, "Are you injured?" Yi Wuchen shook his head gently and did not say anything else. His handsome face looked very calm, but Yi Futian did not know what he was thinking. Nevertheless, anyone who was humiliated as a handicapped would certainly be furious. Moreover, Yi Wuchen's broken arm was indeed his major flaw. Next, the person on the sky stairwell said. "Me," someone replied. However, before the person could walk out, someone else in the crowd was already walking towards the center of the arena. Many people seemed to be very surprised. The person who walked out first was actually Yi Futian. Yi Futian strolled to the center of the arena and stopped. Ignoring the amused stares of everyone, he looked in a certain direction. It was where Yi Nan had just returned to. "Get the fuck over here," Yi Futian said, pointing at Yan Nan. After Yan Nan lost, he still called Yi Wuchen a handicapped. Yi Wuchen did not seem to mind, but Yi Futian did. Chapter 550. When Yi Futian pointed at Yan Nan and shouted the three words, countless gazes landed on Yi Futian again. Previously, Xia Ji had challenged Yi Futian and he had conceded. After all, the difference in cultivation level was evident. Now, what confidence did he have to challenge Yan Nan? When Yi Futian pointed at Yan Nan and shouted the three words, countless gazes landed on Yi Futian again. Previously, Xia Ji had challenged Yi Futian and he had conceded. After all, the difference in cultivation level was evident. Now, what confidence did he have to challenge Yan Nan? Yan Nan was a grade 8 noble, also 2 cultivation levels higher than him. Moreover, Yan Nan's potential was extraordinary. Even though he had been defeated previously, it did not mean that his battle ability was not strong. How was Yi Futian going to surpass difference of 2 cultivation levels? Yan Nan also stared at Yi Futian ruthlessly. His previous defeat was already a humiliation to him. Now, the Arcana Plane Yi Futian actually dared to challenge him? He did not challenge Yi Futian, but Yi Wuchen, because Yi Futian had already conceded once. If he challenged him, Yi Futian would probably concede again, so he had chosen Yi Wuchen. Yet, after suffering a loss, Yi Futian had pointed his finger at him and ordered him to get the fuck over here. Ridiculous. Whoosh! Sword will started to circulate around his body and Yan Nan's body dashed forward like a sword being pulled from its sheath, heading for the center of the battlefield. Since you want to scram, I'll grant you your wish, Yan Nan said as he walked in the air. This fight, Yi Futian was the challenger. As long as he could crush Yi Futian convincingly, he would be eliminated with another loss. He would not even have the right to enter the Thousand Holy Island. Behind him, a sword floated in the air, countless sword wills surrounded the shadow sword and the edgeless great sword appeared again. With every step he took, it was as though a sword will pierce Yi Futian's body. Around Yi Futian's body, meteorites started to form. It was like a starry dimension above his head with brilliant meteorites revolving around his body, providing a sturdy defense. However, Yan Nan was a swordsman and had a terrifying attacking ability. He would not care about the defense of an Arcana Plane cultivator, he would slice through it like a hot knife through butter. If Yi Wuchen had not cast the illusory sword technique at the end, his offense would not have been defeated. An intimidating aura descended and Yan Nan's life spirit turned into a great sword and swung down towards Yi Futian, tearing through everything in its way. If he had the chance, he would definitely kill Yi Futian without hesitation. As the edgeless great sword dropped from the sky, the meteorites it came into contact with were all shattered into dust. The starry defense was unable to stand up to the might of the sword and were all crushed. Die! Yan Nan exclaimed mercilessly, his great sword increasing in speed all of a sudden and slashing towards Yi Futian's body. Yi Futian retreated and the great sword pierced into the ground with a huge thud. Is this what allowed you to be arrogant? Yan Nan looked at Yi Futian sarcastically. His great sword humming, it started to chase Yi Futian again, but Yi Futian's speed was still extremely fast, just like his previous battle with Zhuge Ping, he was mainly dodging. Crash! The sword chi shattered and the sword life spirit returned to Yan Nan. Yan Nan looked mercilessly at Yi Futian and thought, since the great sword can't catch up, I'll use the sword of light. Yan Nan's body turned into a sword ray and charged towards Yi Futian. Wherever his body passed by, the sword would roar and countless sword chi moved alongside his body towards Yi Futian. Kill! With a resounding roar, the light sword's shadows tore through the air like flashes of lightning towards Yi Futian's body. However, at that moment, an invisible gravity and frost will appeared in the heavens and everything felt like it had slowed down. Yi Futian's hands struck out and large golden palm prints manifested, colliding with the swords of light. However, the palm prints were pierced through and destroyed, but the might of the swords were also weakened and unable to threaten him. At the same time, the shadow blades appeared out of the blue, but Yi Futian transformed into the constellations, the glimmer of the stars surrounding him. As the shadow blades slashed towards him, all they could hear was bam, bam, bam. 3 consecutive rumbles later, the starry defense had cracks in it, as though if another attack was to land, it would crumble to pieces. Still not admitting your defeat? Yan Nan sneered. He stretched out his arm, his sword life spirit appearing in his palm. An imposing sword chi circulated in his palm and in a flash, his body was headed straight towards Yi Futian. Be careful. On the outside, Li Qingyi who was watching the battle shouted out instinctively. She could see that Yan Nan wanted to kill Yi Futian. A horrifying amount of lightning circulated around Yi Futian's body and the thunder god's aegis appeared in front of him. Yan Nan descended in front of him and slashed out with his blade. Numerous sword shadows appeared in the heavens and slashed on the aegis, cleaving it apart. The punishment of the Thunder God. A sharp glint appeared in Yi Futian's eyes as the lightning in the shattered Thunder God's aegis remained in the air. The golden-purple lightning gleamed as it rushed towards Yan Nan's body along his sword. With the speed of lightning, the punishment of the Thunder God landed on him as he tried to approach for a close-range strike. However, a sword veil circulated around Yan Nan's body, and as the lightning rushed towards him, Yan Nan could only feel his spiritual will and body both becoming numb, like he was struck by lightning. Nonetheless, his sword strike did not stop. If Yi Futian dared to be so insane, then he would die. As the sword landed, it did not cleave Yi Futian's body in two, as golden vines started to appear and tangle around Yan Nan's sword. The hardy vines were successively sliced apart and sword chi simultaneously rushed towards Yi Futian. However, at that moment, a pair of giant shining rock wings appeared on Yi Futian's back and folded up, shielding Yi Futian from the onslaught of the sword chi. At the same time, Yi Futian's wings shuddered and he transformed into a flash of golden lightning. Yan Nan felt that something was amiss and let go of his sword, retreating. However, the gravity and frost will had affected his speed. Scram! Yan Nan saw Yi Futian rushing towards him and his finger pointed forward, sword chi rushing forth. However, he only saw a golden afterimage and felt wind and thunder. The rock's wings, thundering illusion step and wind aviation. When the three of them were used together, how fast could one get? Yan Nan could see the golden afterimage being magnified in his field of vision, curving in a perfect arc, avoiding his sword chi. A fearsome sword veil appeared around Yan Nan's body, he had been forced to defend once again. Freeze, Yi Futian growled and the frost spell landed. Yan Nan's blood felt as though it was about to stop flowing and his speed decreased yet again. However, the sword veil around his body shattered the oncoming frost will. However, at that moment, Yi Futian had already reached and a golden afterimage appeared above Yan Nan's head. He immediately cast the fatal entanglement and terrifying golden vines constricted Yan Nan's head, then his arms and legs. Many people's expression paled, especially Yan Jiao, who looked especially grim. What was Yi Futian trying to do? He was controlling Yan Nan, not allowing him to concede defeat. A muffled howl sounded out, Yan Nan's throat had been constricted and he was unable to control the flow of his sword will. He had been completely restrained in the air. Let go of him, he admitted his defeat, Yan Jiao shouted. Yi Futian raised his head and looked menacingly at Yan Jiao, then replied emotionlessly, I heard nothing. As he finished speaking, the golden vines pierced through Yan Nan's arms, severing all the tendons in his arms. Yan Nan trembled in pain as the vines around his neck and head disappeared, only then could they hear his screaming voice. Since he's already disabled, there's no need for him to stay, Yi Futian said nonchalantly, the vines flinging Yan Nan a distance away. Yan Jiao moved in a flash and caught his body, only to see Yan Nan's arms dangling helplessly. His eyes filled with killing intent. I've been disabled? Yan Nan's body shuddered, unable to believe that it was real. Yan Jiao looked at Yan Nan and said, even with broken arms, you will still be able to cultivate. That was all he could do to console him. Yan Nan's eyes filled with agony, as though blood could drip out of them. He had extraordinary potential and wanted to enter the Holy Ji Palace to spread the name of the Sword Saint Villa. However, he had been disabled by an Arcana Plane cultivator, no less. Many gazes landed on Yi Futian and Yan Nan. To Yan Nan, it was a tragedy. The genius of the Sword Saint Villa, disabled in both arms. How cruel of Yi Futian. Just because Yan Nan insulted Yi Wuchen for being crippled, he turned Yan Nan into a cripple. Everyone. At that moment, on the sky stairwell, the elder hosting the battles looked towards the experts from the Holy Ji Palace to see if anyone was willing to take in Yi Futian. Intentionally controlling others so that they are unable to concede defeat and disabling one's arms in a battle. His methods are too sinister, a gruff voice sounded out. Many people looked towards the person who had spoken, it was a sage plain figure from the Thousand Holy Island. Yi Futian heard the voice and raised his head in the direction of the Holy Ji Palace. Sinister? The elders from the Holy Ji Palace should have seen that Yan Nan's battling methods were attempts on his life. "I've heard that this person has come from the Dawn Road and is a bloodthirsty and cruel individual," another person agreed. Yi Futian had a glint in his eyes and felt that something was amiss. There was someone who was targeting him. He did not know anyone from the Holy Ji Palace. If there was someone he had offended, it would be Ning Huang's elder. He did not know if Ning Huang's elder was among the two people that had spoken. Elder Ning was not among the two that had spoken. At that moment, he was in a location high up and the Ning clan was there as well, watching the scene quietly. Moreover, Elder Ning was drinking a cup of tea leisurely. With his position and status, why would he get involved personally? If Yi Futian were to enter the Holy Ji Palace to cultivate, it would not be that easy to kill him. To him, an Arcana Plane cultivator was not worth mentioning. If he valued that person's potential, that person would be a genius, but if he did not like that person, he would be but a mere ant. Although the potential that Yi Futian had just revealed was acceptable, he had killed Ning Huang. Ning Huang was the successor that he had handpicked, and he heard that they had even taken the ritual implement he had given Ning Huang. How impudent! That was why he wanted to stop Yi Futian from entering the Holy Ji Palace. As long as Yi Futian did not enter the palace, killing him would be as easy as squashing an ant. Of course, he was not in a hurry, neither would he step in himself. Because of the two voices, nobody spoke for a period of time, causing the scenario to become awkward. As an Arcana Plane cultivator who had disabled Yan Nan's arms, he should have been vigorously fought for. Chapter 551, 551 The Perfect Man. 551 The Perfect Man, I don't agree with that. Suddenly, a gentle-looking middle-aged man from the Holy Ji Palace smiled and said, Yan Nan challenged another person and even humiliated him verbally. Moreover, he was cruel in the battle, wanting to kill his opponent. If he had the chance, he would definitely kill Yi Wuchen and Yi Futian. It is obvious that there is some resentment between them. Yan Nan did not manage to do what he wanted to. I don't think there is anything wrong with Yi Futian's response. As for what happened in Dawn Road, I'm not too sure, but since the holy roads are organized by the Holy Ji Palace, whatever that has happened there is certainly within our rules. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Futian and asked, Do you want to join my island? Many people stared at the middle-aged man calmly. They roughly knew why the two sages earlier would make things difficult for Yi Futian. The elder on the sky stairwell nodded. Looking at Yi Futian, he asked, Are you willing? Yi Futian looked in the direction where the middle-aged man was at. He bowed gently and replied, Thank you, senior. However, I would like to stay in the arena and continue fighting. All right. The middle-aged man nodded, smiling. You indeed have the chance to cultivate in the Holy Island. Seize the opportunity. Thank you. Yi Futian nodded. Then, he backed off from the arena and returned to his original position. He actually rejected it. Many people were surprised. Yi Futian was in the Arcana Plane and yet he did not grasp the opportunity. It seemed like he wanted to enter the core island. He was indeed ambitious. Nevertheless, it was extremely difficult to enter the core island. Elder Ning was still drinking his tea quietly. Just like what he had expected, there was still someone who invited Yi Futian. He was also not surprised by Yi Futian's rejection. Ning Huang had died because of Yi Futian and Yu Sheng. How could they be satisfied by the 1,000 holy islands? Suddenly, another person walked out. When he appeared, everyone's eyes froze again. The person was Yen Zhou from Sword Saint Villa. Clearly, he was going to take revenge. I challenge Hua Jieyu. Yen Zhou looked at the lady beside Yi Futian. A strange expression appeared on the faces of many. Yi Futian had disabled Yan Nan's arms, while Yen Zhou challenged Hua Jieyu, Yi Futian's girlfriend. He was deliberately trying to humiliate Yi Futian. Although Hua Jieyu was a divine spiritual sorcerer, she had only just entered the noble plane. She was clearly no match for Yen Zhou. A cold beam of light immediately erupted from Yi Futian's eyes as he stared at Yan Jiu, who was also looking at him. If Hua Jieyu rejected the challenge, Yan Jiu would challenge the people beside Yi Futian one by one. As long as nobody responded to his challenge, he could continue doing so to humiliate Yi Futian and his friends. If, however, someone accepted the challenge, he would surely not show any mercy. Zhuge Canyang and Zhuge Mingyue looked at the arena below them emotionlessly. The juniors from Sword Saint Villa were really unruly. If Yan Jiu challenged Zhuge Xing, they would naturally not say anything. However, by challenging Hua Jieyu, he was obviously trying to humiliate Yi Futian instead of displaying his power. Jieyu, don't go, Yi Futian said to Hua Jieyu. He knew that Yan Jiu would not show mercy. I'll try. Hua Jieyu smiled gently at Yi Futian. Seeing Yi Futian shake his head, she smiled and said, just now, you also responded to Xie Ji's challenge, didn't you? If I cannot continue, I'll admit defeat. Be careful then. Yi Futian nodded. Of course, Hua Jieyu responded. Then, she flashed and walked gracefully towards the center of the arena, attracting countless stares. Even if she rejected the challenge, Yan Jiu would not give up so easily. Yan Jiu stared at the charming figure before him. Yi Futian was really lucky to have her. Are you ready? Yan Jiu asked. Let's begin, Hua Jieyu replied. Just as she finished speaking, sword chi whizzed over from Yan Jiu's body. At once, many straight lightning-like swords shot towards Hua Jieyu. At the same time, a terrifying sword aurora erupted from Yan Jiu's sharp eyes. It was as if a sword hidden inside his pupils was charging towards Hua Jieyu's eyes. Hua Jieyu released her life spirit and dharma. Immediately, a seven-colored crown appeared and her already alluring body looked even more like an empress. An invisible wave of spiritual energy enveloped the arena. The incoming brilliant sword chi seemed to have slowed and was covered with frost. Then, the sharp swords vibrated violently and buzzed, after which they were crushed into nothingness. Yan Jiu jumped into the air. Sword chi filled the sky and blotted out the sun. As he pointed his finger forward, a frightening wave of sword rain fell down from the sky. Hua Jieyu raised her head and a brilliant radiance bloomed from her pupils. The crown vibrated and an appalling wave of spiritual energy engulfed the sky. When the sword rain arrived, the sharp swords actually changed direction and passed beside her. On the other hand, the swords that did not change direction exploded one after another. Hua Jieyu, who was covered in a seven-colored radiance, did not move, but everyone knew that she was using her powerful spiritual energy as a divine spiritual sorcerer to fight. Thud! Hua Jieyu suddenly felt a strong sense of danger as Yan Jiu charged towards her like a sharp sword. He knew that Hua Jieyu was a divine spiritual sorcerer and flying swords would not be able to injure her. Divine spiritual sorcerer was the ultimate type of sorcerer, and the weakness of all sorcerers was their poor melee abilities. If he could attack her from a closer distance, he would surely win. Yan Jiu's speed was so fast that Hua Jieyu did not have any time to think. Ice seal and many vines wound around Yan Jiu's body, but they were all crushed by his sword will and could not stop him even for a bit. The seven-colored radiance above the crown became more dazzling. Yan Jiu felt that his body and the sword in his hand suddenly deviate from their intended trajectories slightly. On the other hand, Hua Jieyu's body danced with the wind and rotated in the air as she backed away, passing by the strike marginally. I admit defeat, Hua Jieyu said softly. Yan Jiu was about to attack again and his sword rubbed against the ground, but he could only stop. Sword chi dissipated and Hua Jieyu landed slowly and elegantly on the ground. Looking at her, many people praised her in their minds. Although she had taken part in the fight, it ended at the appropriate time. Yan Jiu had displayed his power, and she had also displayed her abilities. In this way, Yan Jiu would not be able to continue challenging them. Divine Spiritual Sorcerer was indeed a powerful class. The fatal strike just now actually missed. If Hua Jieyu was also a grade 7 noble, could she control Yan Jiu's sword directly with her spiritual energy? Yan Zhou's face darkened. Although he had beat Hua Jieyu, it was actually a failure for him because he did not manage to do anything else. Not only could a divine spiritual sorcerer suppress other sorcerers, but she could also suppress any cultivators, in fact. After all, to be a divine spiritual sorcerer, one first had to become an outstanding spirit elemental sorcerer. Both of them were invited by the cultivators from the 1,000 Holy Islands. However, both rejected and returned to their original positions. The battle continued. Yi Futian and his friends all had an amazing performance and were invited the 1,000 Holy Islands, but only Mai Zhiqiu and Xianyuan Beishan accepted the offers. The rest rejected, planning to continue fighting. In the arena, many extraordinary cultivators showed up one after another. The geniuses from the 9 holy roads were all displaying their talents. This round continued for 3 whole days. By the time everyone had participated in at least one battle, only a small proportion of people was left in the vast arena. There were 160 cultivators left. The elimination started with tens of thousands of cultivators, and at the moment, there were only 160. These 160 cultivators were all geniuses who had rejected the offers from the 1,000 Holy Islands. They wanted to enter the core island of the Holy Ji Palace. The other people had either joined the 1,000 Holy Islands or were eliminated. On the sky stairwell, the elder who was hosting the battle looked at the arena and said, "All of you must be tired after so many battles. Some of you are also injured. We'll take a one-day break. Tomorrow, many seniors from the Holy Ji Palace will be here to watch the battles, so you should prepare. During the break, do not leave the island. Also, no conflicts are allowed." After he finished speaking, many powerful cultivators from the Holy Ji Palace stood up and returned to the palace. Some of them also chatted as they walked. Below them, many people walked towards the arena, looking for their juniors who were not eliminated. After all, the people from many major forces were present today. Many young people raised their heads and looked in the direction of the Holy Ji Palace. In particular, Bai Luli had received the most attention. He was so bright and was admired by countless people. Suddenly, Bai Luli walked towards where Zhuge Canyang and Zhuge Mingyue were. "Canyang, Mingyue," Bai Luli shouted, smiling. "Luli," Zhuge Canyang responded, smiling. "In the admission test this time, what do you think of the people who were not eliminated? There are many outstanding juniors. I met Hua Jieyu earlier, but I only managed to watch her fight today. Divine spiritual sorcerer indeed deserves its name. I think that tomorrow, many seniors will fight to take her. Who will you let Jieyu cultivate under?" Bai Luli asked softly. Mingyue said that she will respect Hua Jieyu's own decision, Zhuge Canyang replied. "That's great. Zhuge Xing is outstanding as well. Moreover, there are people like Huang Jiuge, Su Kei, and Qi Meng, so there are indeed many excellent juniors. There are also a few people whose levels are low, but they have already displayed their amazing potential. The cohort this year is better than the one 3 years ago. I think the battles tomorrow will be interesting," Bai Luli said, smiling. "Bai Zei is certainly one of them. I heard that you have guided him before, and his talents are unsurpassed. I am also looking forward to the fights between the best juniors tomorrow," Zhuge Canyang said. "Alright, I will return to the palace first." Bai Luli nodded gently at Zhuge Canyang and Zhuge Mingyue, after which he left elegantly. After he left, Zhuge Canyang looked at Zhuge Mingyue who was beside him and said softly, "You can't find another person in the barren state who is as outstanding as Bai Luli. Furthermore, he is humble. Even when he wants to show his affection towards you, he only does so appropriately and never crosses the line. I really don't know what you're thinking." Smiling, Zhuge Mingyue glanced at Zhuge Canyang and said, "Don't you feel that if a person is too perfect, he will be difficult to understand?" Zhuge Canyang stared at her. Indeed, Bai Luli could be considered as a perfect man. Bai Luli was handsome, elegant, talented, powerful, and had a strong background. He was the youngest person on the Barren Sky ranking, and moreover, he was in the 10th place. He really seemed to be flawless. I prefer someone who is cuter. Zhuge Mingyue smiled and stepped forward, walking towards Yi Futian, who was below them. It seems that you don't see things as clearly as your juniors. Mu Zhiqiu is very close with Yi Futian now, and yet you continue to be stubborn. The Zhaixing house will not be having a good end with you in charge. Yi Futian blinked and looked at Qin Yuan, then at Hua Jieyu by his side. Seeing Hua Jieyu smiling at him, he could not help but say, "Headmaster, please don't go about saying things like that. I'm just friends with Zhiqiu. Just friends, nothing else. Right, Zhiqiu?" Yi Futian asked, looking at her. "Just what is this old fart doing? Is he trying to kill me or something?" Yi Futian thought. "Sorry, a slip of the tongue." Qin Yuan waved his hand, and the smile on his face made Yi Futian want badly to slug someone. Mu Zhiqiu looked rather funny instead and glanced at Hua Jieyu. The two beautiful girls' eyes met for a brief moment. Mu Zhiqiu saw that Hua Jieyu's smile was gentle and there was no animosity within. While she herself was a beauty nonetheless, she could not help but marvel at Hua Jieyu's looks. What a beauty indeed! She turned her eyes to Yi Futian and nodded in agreement. Yi Futian saw other pretty girls like Gu Yunxi and Qi Nin were standing nearby and thought it would have been really awkward to stay there for long. He then said, "I heard the island is really beautiful. If you're free, I guess it'd be a good idea to go walk for a bit. Now, if you'll excuse us." He dragged Hua Jieyu away as soon as he was done talking, before asking Qi Nin telepathically, "Qi Nin, take care of Qingyi for me, thanks." Qi Nin glanced at Yi Futian and sighed in her mind. "He's off just like that." Yi Shaoshi glared at him. The members of their group were not all that familiar with each other and had only gathered around Yi Futian. "Very nice of you, running off with your girlfriend and all that." Yu Xing glanced at Yi Shaoshi and said, "You're not telling me that you haven't gotten used to this." Yi Shaoshi's eyes met Yu Xing's, and he answered, "I'm still getting used to it." He had heard even back in the cottage that Yi Futian was the kind who would be very nice with the sisters and harsh with the brothers. And it seemed to be a tradition of sorts. "Brother Yuan, what do you say we get a place and spar for a bit?" The fat guy asked the ape beside him. "I'm taken." Yuan Zhan did not bother doing much with him, going in the direction of his father instead. Gu Yunxi's eyes looked rather dejected seeing Yi Futian walk away. "Yunxi," her brother called out to her. "Yes." Gu Yunxi turned around. "What's going on in your head?" Gu Ming asked. There was no way he would not have known what was actually in her head. It was just that Yi Futian was probably not the kind of person Gu Yunxi would be able to get her hands on. "I was just thinking, well, what a couple those two are." Gu Yunxi's smile was beaming, seemingly very happy herself. Gu Ming was dumbfounded. He had thought his sister would have felt down from all that she had just seen. He stared at her for a bit and found her smile stayed intact, and he felt very confused. The training island right before the Holy Ji Palace looked incredibly lively. Countless were discussing the battles to take place the day, and many were speculating what the battles the next day would be like. The little more than 100 selected today were the strongest of the strongest seen thus far, including top-notch figures from top-notch forces. Those people seemed to have never clashed before, yet with the battle for the zenith at hand the next day, there was simply no way no one would not have been excited. Many were wondering if Huang Jiuge of the sovereign family or Su Ke from Tingxue House was stronger. Who would prove more excellent, Bai Zhe from White Cloud City or Zhuge Xing from the Zhuge family? There were also top-class geniuses from other holy roads. How brilliant things would get the next day with them showing off what they had. How Yi Futian, that young man of only the Arcana plane, would perform on such a stage. Who would reign supreme? All that liveliness seemed to have nothing to do with Yi Futian. He and Hua Jieyu came to a cliff on the east of the island. They were able to gaze upon the other islands and the azure holy river far away. It was a sight to behold, and the place felt like heaven on earth. The two of them walked on the rocks on the cliff, with Yi Futian taking Hua Jieyu's hand, wobbling about as they moved, and sweet smiles were seen on their faces. A great battle took place the very first time they met each other after being separated for more than 2 years, and now, they were finally alone. "Why are you taking me here?" Hua Jieyu asked with a smile. "There is no one else around, so I figured it would be a rather good place to get something done." Yi Futian answered her question with a smile that was just as bright. Hua Jieyu blinked her eyes and felt something was off. "A good place for talking about those friends of yours. Very pretty girls, all of them." Hua Jieyu smiled naughtily, which had Yi Futian shuddering. "My fox, please, I've told you, we're just friends. Don't go having weird thoughts about me and them." "Is that so?" Hua Jieyu smiled and continued, "And there I was thinking I've got my hands full and it's a good thing I get someone else to look after you too." "You mean it?" Yi Futian blinked. However, he ended up swallowing those words right before they were about to come out of his mouth. But looking at how Hua Jieyu kept grinning, he said instead, "Well, not a problem. Lulan Shui was an easy one to look after. Just get her a servant girl or something." "That's so?" Hua Jieyu murmured, "Well, how about Jieyu, can you stop talking about other people?" Yi Futian pulled her into his arms. Hua Jieyu tilted her head to look at him, nodded for a bit and leaned on his chest, hugging him. "I've had quite a lot to talk to you about before I got here. But now that you're right in front of me, I don't quite know what to say instead." Hua Jieyu then asked gently, "How have you been for the past 2 years? Do I look like I've had bad days?" Yi Futian asked in an equally gentle tone. "I think you were having a good time." Hua Jieyu answered with a smile, thinking about all the pretty girls around him. "What about you?" Yi Futian's voice was flighty. He did not tell Hua Jieyu that he had actually died once. "I have a big sister looking after me. Of course, I'm good." "Good thing to know then." Yi Futian nodded. "I'm getting rather drowsy. How about we lie down for a bit?" Hua Jieyu came out from his embrace and grinned at him. "All right, we have a nice quiet place here. A good one for training." "Wait, what?" Yi Futian blinked. "A good time and incredibly beautiful scenery like this, and you're thinking about training? Gosh, you're harsh. Haven't you noticed that many have painted you as a target? The battle tomorrow will probably not be an easy one. If you want to enter the Holy Ji Palace, you will need to do better than how you fought Xie Ji today. So, let's see if you'll have a breakthrough today," Hua Jieyu said. "We have less than a day." Yi Futian added, "I think it's best to get some rest instead. If you manage to break through the noble plane, you can sleep all you want." Hua Jieyu glared at him. "Sleep all I want?" Yi Futian blinked. Hua Jieyu was stunned for a bit before her face flushed red. "That was so not what I meant. If you are able to make it into the noble plane before the battle tomorrow, all you want indeed." Hua Jieyu smiled sheepishly at him, and Yi Futian's heart beat like there was no tomorrow. "You know how to work your man indeed. Jieyu, I think you have a very, very good point. The battle tomorrow is of utmost importance, and as such, I need to train well. As such, I will go train right now." Yi Futian added seriously, "Don't hold me back." He flashed and found a good spot to fold his legs on. He sat down and actually got ready for training. Jieyu sat on a rock not far from he was, with her elbows on her knees and her hands cupping her chin. She watched silently at the side. The smile on her face never went away. "I haven't seen this guy for 2 years, and I think he somehow got even more handsome." Chapter 553, Yi Futian sat on the huge boulder. He got rid of all other thoughts and focused on fusing his spiritual power with the world. He sensed the spiritual qi in the world. Yi Futian sat on the huge boulder. He got rid of all other thoughts and focused on fusing his spiritual power with the world. He sensed the spiritual qi in the world. A rainbow of lights shone. Now, the lights of the 6 elements were brighter while the green wood elemental's spiritual chi was dimmer. It was the only element that he hadn't comprehended the noble will for, so his perception was slightly weaker. The 6 lights disappeared from his senses. Only the green wood elemental's spiritual chi remained around him. At the same time, his mind went into his life palace. The world tree towered over the vast space. The sun and moon hung high in the sky. Thunder dragons spiraled around the tree while a golden rock rested on a branch. The divine ape guarded the tree. All his life spirits lived in harmony with the tree as the center. The wood elemental was different from the others. The wood spells he'd cultivated before were all focused on control. The ones he encountered now were mostly on control too. They were rarely for attacking. However, when he'd been close to dying last time, it was the world tree life spirit that helped reform his body. The wood element's most obvious characteristic was that it encompassed all life and was never extinguished. The man who had killed Du Ao had used a wood elemental spell that became even more frightening when burned. No matter how the wood elemental was attacked, it would continue standing tall. Then what was the wood will? In his life palace, the world tree kept changing color. Sometimes it was gold, sometimes it was purple. The tree shook and the leaves rustled as if it was speaking. Spiritual light flashed through Futian's mind. Then he saw green light shine around him. A huge ancient tree sprouted behind him. The branches and leaves expanded wildly, stretching upward and covering the sky. It soon became a huge tree rooted beside the cliff. The branches swayed in the wind. Spiritual chi gathered frantically on the tree. Then golden vines appeared, transforming into the deadly lock spell that stretched into the distance. The world tree encompasses all living things. It doesn't die and the spiritual chi doesn't decay, Yi Futian mumbled. Then a sun hung above the tree. It released the fire of a divine furnace to smelt everything. The green light on the tree melted into the furnace, making the fire burn even more vibrantly. The divine furnace's fire had a green tinge, giving off green flames that were even more terrifying than before. I understand, Yi Futian thought. This was the wood elemental's will. Moving his thoughts, the green spiritual chi in the air grew clearer. They rushed wildly into the tree and then entered his body. The so-called will was one's comprehension of spiritual power. Once his comprehension improved, he would be faster at absorbing spiritual chi and raising his spiritual power too. In fact, all the wood elemental's spiritual chi in the world was resonating with him. The entire world seemed to be green and filled with vitality. He comprehended again. Hua Jieyu sat to the side and smiled brilliantly. This guy was so powerful. Yi Futian had already comprehended noble wills of 6 elements, so he had the abilities. Plus, the wood elemental life spirit was his natal spirit. Naturally, comprehending the wood elemental wouldn't take too long. However, his spiritual power wasn't enough. He was still a step away from the noble plane, though he was getting closer. The island city was still lively while the cliff was peaceful. Without realizing, another day passed. When the sun rose, faint sunlight splashed onto the cliff. It was warm and serene. 2 figures leaned quietly against a boulder. The youth was handsome while the girl was beautiful. She rested softly against the youth's chest. The breeze lifted her hair softly. The scene was like a painting. So beautiful. Yi Futian looked at the beauty in his arms. It was unclear if he was praising the scenery or the girl. Hua Jieyu looked up at him. Did you raise planes? Only a bit more. Yi Futian rubbed his forehead awkwardly. Just a bit. So you didn't. Hua Jieyu grinned at him. Then why did you run over here at midnight? Yi Futian fluttered his lashes and then looked away. You didn't object though. As soon as he spoke, he felt pain in his waist and he gasped. How come they'd grown up but she still did that? Someone kept cuddling with me last night. I wonder who it was. Yi Futian blinked at the beauty in his arms. Hua Jieyu's face reddened and she straightened. Just as she was about to move, Yi quickly jumped up and said, "The time isn't up yet. I'm going to continue cultivating." He escaped while speaking. Hua Jieyu stood up. Her beautiful figure and slender legs were so mesmerizing under the sunlight. However, Yi Futian didn't enjoy the sight. Right now, he faced the rising sun. Divine light shone from his body. A strange aura surged from him too. Then he started practicing martial arts. Activating the Emperor's technique, Yi Futian moved slowly. However, each move seemed to contain an Emperor's power. The will was strong and lively too. Watching him, Hua Jieyu felt enjoyment. The moves didn't seem to contain any might, but his aura was getting stronger. Divine light enveloped him as if he was a god coming to earth. Every simple punch seemed able to destroy a mountain. As Yi Futian continued cultivating, dragon or ape roars occasionally sounded from his body. The expansive movements were like a golden rock flying in the wind. He shattered the rock under his feet, rumbling. Cracking sounds came out of his body and an even stronger conception was born. An aggressive force formed in the surroundings. His martial arts intent stretched out as the force became stronger. His aura kept rising. Boom! Beams of dazzling emperor light shot upward. Seemingly undefeatable, martial arts intent transformed into a horrible force field around him. If one stepped within it, they would feel his unstoppable might press down. As more cracks sounded, Yi Futian's body rumbled. Dragon and divine ape roars shook the sky. The golden rock's brilliance became one with the surrounding force field. He seemed to be a descending god. As the horrible light flashed, the stones around him exploded. Yi Futian broke the sky with a punch. An extremely dazzling fist shadow flashed and disappeared in the distance. Yi Futian stopped. His power was still strong, but he didn't release it. He turned slowly and smiled at Hua Jieyu. At that time, Hua Jieyu had a strange expression. She turned to run. Doesn't count. Raising planes in martial arts is raising planes too. It's still the noble plane. Why doesn't it count? Yi Futian ran after her. Was she not going to keep her promise? You didn't break into the plane completely. Of course, it doesn't count. With a wind spell carrying her, Hua Jieyu flew like a fairy. Her figure was beautiful. Then let me ask you. Am I in the noble plane right now? Yi Futian yelled. He wouldn't let her cheat. No, Hua Jieyu insisted. Fox, you can't do this. Yi Futian made a face. If I say it's not, then it's not. Hua Jieyu ignored all logic. Plus, you already slept last night. Gentlemen keep their word. Yi Futian called. I'm a woman, Hua Jieyu replied. You can't do this. Yi Futian muttered. I learned this from you. The two chased each other from the cliff to the island city. Along the way, many people on the ground looked up at this couple enviously. The city was extremely lively. Hua Jieyu had already descended. Yi Futian went up to her and whispered, I'll let it go today, but I'll remember what you owe me. I forgot. Hua Jieyu smiled at Yi Futian. Then I'll force it, Yi Futian whispered in Hua Jieyu's ears. She blushed instantly and wrapped an arm around Yi Futian, making him gasp. I dare you, Hua Jieyu said, smiling as she looked up. I'll do it. I'm not scared of my wife, Yi Futian huffed. It was time to show his status in the family. Really? Hua Jieyu grinned at him. Yi Futian was frustrated. What kind of look was that? Everyone in the city was walking towards the battlefield. Many recognized Hua Jieyu and Yi Futian. Yesterday, they'd both entered the final list. Because they were so attractive, it was hard not to notice them. Yi Futian and Hua Jieyu seemed to be really close to each other. I heard that they met long ago. Of course, they're close, but it's quite a pity. How is it a pity? They're both so talented. Yi Futian may have a lower plane, but he's extraordinarily talented too. Yes, but he's still far from the divine spiritual sorcerer. Furthermore, if one wants to compare family backgrounds, how can he be compared to Zhuge Xing? With Hua Jieyu's looks and talent, Zhuge Xing, Bai Zhe, and Huang Jiuge are those that suit her. Shh. Someone said. What are you scared of? The city doesn't allow fighting. Plus, aren't I speaking the truth? The person said, smiling. He didn't hide his voice. Many people glanced at Yi Futian, only to see Hua Jieyu grab his hand and smile brilliantly. She looked around and then grinned at Yi Futian. Did you hear? Yes. Yi Futian nodded. He looked as if he didn't care. See, they all think I'm pretty talented. I'm still not at your level, but I'll work hard. You can't abandon me in the future. Hua Jieyu smiled like hundreds of flowers blooming. The people around them all froze. Some even stopped walking and gaped at the enchanting girl. Yi Futian froze too. Then he smiled gently, feeling warm inside. This fox was quite sensitive. Silly girl, what are you thinking about? Yi Futian patted Hua Jieyu's head and she glared at him with mock anger. They continued forward, leaving the crowd in the wind. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.